Hey, welcome back. I'm glad you're here tonight. Before we drift off too far, maybe take a deep breath. Feel your shoulders drop, your eyelids grow heavy. If you haven't done it yet, dim the lights, tuck yourself in, and let the darkness do what it does best. Wrap around you like a blanket you forgot you needed. Tonight, we're going to travel far back. Back to a time when the world smelled of smoke, damp earth, and secrets whispered behind closed doors. A time when fear wasn't just in your mind. It clung to your clothes, your hair, and sometimes your heartbeat. We're stepping into a village somewhere in Europe. Not the Europe of shiny castles and heroic knights. No. Picture something smaller. Cobblestone streets that stay wet for days. Straw roofs that hiss when it rains. Chickens pecking in the mud. A stray cat slinking under a fence. Can you hear it? A distant church bell that never seems to stop. It rings for weddings, but lately it rings mostly for funerals. And you're not just an observer tonight. Imagine you live here. You wake up to the smell of porridge burning on a hearth, mixed with the sharp bite of wood smoke. The bed you crawl out of is hard, scratchy. The blanket's thin, but it's all you have. You look out your window. It's just a hole with a wooden shutter, really, and you see your neighbor carrying a bundle of herbs. He ties them to his door with trembling fingers. Superstition, they say, but when the wind blows, it smells faintly sweet, like rosemary trying to mask something darker. The street is hushed. You catch eyes with the baker's wife, and she looks away too quickly. Everyone's been whispering that death has arrived in the next town over. Some say it comes with rats. Others swear it rides the wind, slipping through cracks in your door when you sleep. Meanwhile, inside your tiny house, the fire pops and crackles. For a moment, you feel almost safe, tucked away from the cold night air. But even here, something scratches at the edge of your mind. A sense that no door is thick enough, no prayer strong enough. So, stay close tonight. Let your thoughts wander with me, but don't stray too far. We have so much more to see. So many secrets hidden in the shadows of this plague-haunted village. Now, take another breath. Let the world slow down. We'll walk these muddy streets together, one footstep, one heartbeat at a time. Sleep is near, but first, let's keep going. Let's step outside. Careful. The wooden door creaks on its hinges, and the air hits you like a wet rag. There's a chill that seeps through your clothes, and you can almost taste the morning fog, heavy with the smell of burning kindling and something less pleasant, something like the sour tang of unwashed bodies and old straw. The village, if you could even call it that, is more of a scattered clutch of timber houses huddled together for warmth. There's a crooked main street, just a dirt track really, muddied with wheel ruts and footprints that never quite dry. Small gardens lie dormant behind splintered fences, their last onions pulled weeks ago, the soil turned over and waiting for spring. If spring comes kindly, picture this, an old woman at her doorstep, leaning on the frame. Her shawl is patched so many times you can't tell its original color. She's watching two boys, maybe 7, 8, chase a rat across the muddy lane. The rat disappears under a pile of firewood stacked against the butcher's wall. The boys laugh, but the old woman doesn't. She makes a sign of the cross on her chest, then spits on the ground. Rats are bad luck now. Not that they were ever good luck, mind you. But lately, they've become something else. Omens, messengers of the dark thing that everyone talks about in half whispers. Further down the street, a blacksmith stirs the embers of his forge. Sparks rise and vanish in the haze. He's not working on horseshoes today. There are fewer and fewer horses left to shoe. Instead, he's hammering out iron nails, long and sharp, to board up doors. Some families want to shut themselves in tight, believing wood and nails can keep death at bay. But death is cleverer than that. Meanwhile, you hear a cough. Not a polite little throat clear, but a rasping, chest-deep bark that echoes between the houses. It's the miller's son, propped up on a barrel, blanket pulled around his shoulders. His mother stands behind him, pressing a cloth to his forehead, her face pale as the winter sky. She catches your eye, only for a moment, then looks away, ashamed, as if sickness is a sin she invited in. And above it all, the bell. That old, iron-tongued bell in the small stone church on the hill. It tolls again, slow and deliberate. You've lost count. Is it the third time today, or the fifth? Each ring is a name. Each ring means a door will close tonight and never open again. There's a smell drifting through the village, too. A sharp, herbal haze. People burn whatever they think might cleanse the air. Bundles of sage, rosemary, lavender. Anything that holds a ghost of summer. The smoke curls from windows and cracks under doors. It stings your eyes, clings to your hair, but still, you breathe it in, hoping it does what they say. That keeps the poison out. Children peek from behind shutters, their eyes too big for their faces, little hands pressed against the glass. They're not allowed to play in the street anymore. If you listen close, you can hear mothers hissing at them to come away from the cold draft and the bad air. As if the air itself has teeth. And yet life still flickers on. A young woman carries a basket of bread wrapped in rough cloth. She nods to you as she passes, but her eyes are red, sleepless. She lost her husband last week. They buried him behind the church, in a grave so shallow the earth doesn't quite cover him. She knows it. You know it. But nobody says it. There's no more soil to spare. Someone slams a door. Somewhere a baby cries. A dog barks at the rats that scuttle in the shadows. The town lives, but only just. It feels like a single candle flame in a storm, trembling on its wick. You stand there in the mud and wood smoke and cold, and you wonder if you could peel back every shutter, every door, how many frightened faces would you find waiting in the dark, praying they're spared? So stay close. Don't wander too far from the warmth of your blanket. Let the hush of this doomed village wrap around you. There's so much more to see. So many secrets, soft and sour, hidden under rooftops of straw and tile. Take a breath. Let it linger. The night is just beginning, and the bell keeps ringing. Let's follow that coffee herd. Imagine the way it echoes off damp stone walls, rattles under the thatched roofs. It comes from a small cottage near the edge of the village, a place half hidden behind a sagging fence, its gate forever swinging in the wind like a loose tooth. Inside, it's warm in a way that's almost stifling. A fire burns low, the smell of peat thick and earthy, laced with something sharper, the copper tang of sweat and sickness. You'd wrinkle your nose if you were standing there, the heat pressing at your skin, the air so heavy it sticks to your throat. On a straw mattress near the hearth, a woman sits hunched. Her hair is dark, knotted at the nape of her neck. One hand rests on her lap. The other shakes slightly as she pulls up the sleeve of her worn dress. There, just above her elbow, is a mark, small at first glance, no bigger than a coin. But the edges are raised, angry as if something under the skin is fighting its way out. She presses a fingertip to it, winces, feels the heat radiate. It wasn't there 2 days ago. Yesterday, it was a bruise. This morning, it turned black, and tonight, it throbs like a heartbeat she can't quiet. Her husband paces the small room. His boots scuff the packed earth floor, leaving behind little trails of mud. Every so often, he stops, peers at the mark, then glances at her face, searching for something to say, but the words die in his mouth. He rubs a hand across his chin, rough with stubble, the skin raw from worry. They'd heard about this. Of course they had. Who hasn't? The neighbor's boy, the one who used to toss stones at the chickens, he got a mark just like this one. By the end of the week, he was buried behind the church. They say the gravedigger didn't even bother with a coffin. Just wrapped him in an old sheet and tipped him in the hole. The dirt still sinks when it rains. The woman shivers. The fire can't seem to warm her now. She tries to remember the prayers her mother taught her. Words in Latin she barely understands. She mutters them under her breath, the syllables catching in her throat. Her husband kneels beside her, lifts her hand, kisses her knuckles. His lips brush her skin like an apology. Outside the door, a low murmur carries through the night. Neighbors gathering, whispering. Word travels fast here. A mark like that is more than an illness. It's a promise. It's the first knock on the door from something you can't bolt out. And yet, life flickers stubbornly around them. From the rafters, garlic and dried herbs hang in limp bunches, their fragrance fighting the sourness of fever. A kettle rattles on the hook above the fire, bubbling thin broth. The smell salty, faintly comforting. Imagine that steam curling into the darkness, a small ghost rising toward the thatch. At the foot of the bed, a wooden bowl holds more desperate charms. A sprig of rosemary, a wedge of onion cut in half, a clove of garlic cracked open. She clutches at these small defenses, as if the plague might sniff them and turn away. Picture this. The husband remembers an old tale that the bad air, the miasma, hates the scent of certain flowers. He promises to fetch lavender from the herbalist at dawn, to wrap it around her arms and neck, as if a crown of petals could guard her from death's fingertips. She nods, tries to smile, but her eyes are fixed on the mark, this black spot that seems to pulse in time with her dread. She lifts her hand again, brushes it gently, then flinches. A bead of dark fluid wells up, sticky, foul-smelling. She wipes it on the blanket and doesn't look at it again. Meanwhile, the wind rattles the shutter. The fire hisses as a log shifts. Somewhere far off, the bell rings once, twice, a reminder that the village is counting its losses by the hour. Her husband pulls the blanket tighter around her shoulders. He promises, in a voice that almost convinces himself, that it's just a bruise, just a passing illness. But she knows. He knows. The mark is here, and it's hungry. So, settle in closer. Listen to the hush of the room, the crackle of the fire, the soft prayers, the heartbeat that isn't just hers anymore. Let it drift through you. Let the darkness deepen a little. We've only just seen the first black spot. There will be more. And you're still here, safe, warm, drifting. When you're ready, we'll step outside again. Because outside, the rats are waiting. Let's step out of that stifling cottage, away from the small, whispered prayers and the feverish hush of the sickbed. Outside, the air feels sharper. It smells of damp earth, wood smoke, and something else, the unmistakable stink of 1,000 tiny bodies scurrying where they shouldn't be. Picture this. The muddy lane that snakes through the village is never really empty. Not now. At first glance, it seems quiet, but if you watch the corners, the shadows where the houses lean into each other, you'll see them. Little shapes with fur slicked by the rain, eyes glinting like black beads whenever a lantern flickers. Rats. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. The villagers have given up counting. Imagine waking up to the soft scrape of claws on the beams above your bed, or the sudden clatter of a clay bowl knocked from a shelf in the night. People used to blame the dogs, the cats, but the dogs are dead or gone now. And the cats, well, the cats do their best, but the rats are winning. They pour out from the docks, from the granaries, from the bellies of trade ships that bob in the harbor like rotting coffins. They slip under doors, through thatch, into cellars where sacks of grain lie torn open like wounded animals. And so, the rumors grow as fast as the squeaking, skittering plague itself. In the cramped alehouse at the end of the lane, a low-ceilinged room thick with the smell of spilled beer and sour sweat, the talk never stops. Farmers lean in close over tankards of watery ale, voices dropping low as if the rats themselves might be listening. They carry the poison on their backs. Someone whispers, eyes darting to the corners. It's the fleas, they say, tiny demons in their fur. Fleas, a younger man snorts, wiping foam from his beard. It's witchcraft. You mark my words. Some old crone from the woods brought it here. An older woman, her hair pinned up in a nest of iron-gray coils, leans over her mug. Or maybe it's a punishment, she murmurs. For our sins. For the wars we keep fighting. The gold we keep hoarding. The lies we tell the priest while we're lighting candles for our salvation. And as they talk, the rats are there too. A soft rustle in the rafters. A flash of movement under the table. Someone kicks out a boot, but the rats just scatter, only to regroup by the hearth where the warmth and crumbs gather. Outside, the baker's boy is chasing a pair of them with a stick. He laughs when he corners one against a wall. But when he lifts the stick to strike, it slips away, fat belly dragging in the mud, eyes never leaving his. Some swear you can see a kind of cunning in those tiny eyes now. As if they know. As if they're waiting for you to sleep. Meanwhile, the old herbalist, hunched in her doorway, watches them with narrow eyes. She's seen the bodies, children with tiny bites on their toes, the black swellings that follow days later. She mutters to herself about cats and dogs, and how the town killed too many too soon. She ties bundles of mint and wormwood over her lintel, muttering that they'll do no good now. But it feels better than doing nothing. If you walk the docks at dusk, imagine that creaking pier, slick with brine and rotting fish scales. You'd see the source yourself. The ships that bob, they're full of cargo no one dares unload anymore. Bales of cloth, barrels of spices, all crawling with fleas and fur and sharp, yellow teeth. But the merchants stand on the docks anyway, trying to shout the plague away. One curses the rats in every language he knows, spits into the sea, and throws rotten bread to lure them out. They don't even flinch. And at night, the rumors multiply faster than the rats. Mothers hush their children to sleep with new stories. Don't leave crumbs by the hearth, or the rats will come. Don't open the cellar door at night, or they'll slip in and nest under your bed. Don't, whatever you do, touch one. Its bite is a kiss from death, they say. Inside shuttered cottages, people tuck their feet under rough blankets, shivering at every creak. They stuff rags into the cracks in the walls, light pungent herbs to drive the vermin away. But still, in the dark, there's that sound. Tiny claws scrabbling over beams, tails whispering along floorboards. A lullaby of dread that keeps no one truly asleep. So here you are, in this village on the brink. The plague isn't just carried in the air or in prayers gone unanswered. It scurries at your feet, squeaks in the corners, and grooms its fur while you whisper your hopes into the dark. Take another breath. Let out slow. You're safe, for now, wrapped in your blanket, listening to a world that once lay awake in the hush of claw and rumor. Stay close, because next we'll meet the figure who walks these streets in his long coat and beaked mask, a shape that smells of vinegar and dread. The plague doctor waits, and he has stories too. Imagine this. You're peering out through a narrow gap in your shutter, the same gap you try to stuff with rags to keep the night out. But tonight, curiosity gets the better of you. The street beyond your window is damp, lit only by a scatter of lanterns, their flames flickering like small, terrified hearts. And there he is, the doctor, or at least that's what they call him. Picture him moving slowly through the mist, a tall shape wrapped in a long, wax coat that squeaks faintly when he turns. The hem brushes the filthy street, picking up mud and ashes. In his gloved hand, he carries a staff, part walking stick, part warning, tapping it ahead like a blind man might feel for steps. But he's not blind. Not at all. His mask is the thing that holds your gaze, makes your fingers tighten around the shutter. You've heard the stories. You've whispered them with your neighbors, wondering if it's true that the mask keeps the poison out. But up close, it looks like something out of Nightmare. A pale, stiff hood covers his head, and from it juts that long, curved beak. It gleams slightly when the lantern light hits the oiled leather. Two round glass lenses glint where his eyes should be, cold, unreadable, like dark marbles set in a bone. They say inside that beak he keeps bundles of herbs, lavender, rose petals, mint. Anything to sweeten the rank stench of death that clings to these streets. He breathes through it, or so the rumor goes, so that the bad air, the miasma, cannot crawl up his nose and rot him from the inside out. Some say he adds camphor or vinegar. Some swear he hides cloves and garlic inside, hoping death hates spices as much as he does. Meanwhile, you watch as he pauses at a door. It's marked with a crude red cross, drawn hastily with paint or maybe blood. You can't be sure. He raps 3 times with his staff. Inside, you hear a muffled sob. The door creaks open just wide enough for him to slip in. You imagine what waits on the other side. A mother lying limp on a straw pallet, a child wheezing in a corner, the smell of fear thicker than the smoke from the fire. Inside, the doctor moves like a ghost. Imagine waking up to him at your bedside, the squeak of leather, the faint rattle of the herbs inside his mask, the glass lenses staring down at you while he prods the dark swelling on your neck. He says nothing, or if he does, his voice is muffled, warped by the beak. He smells of vinegar and dried flowers, but beneath that, you know what he really smells of? Hopelessness in a neat, practical disguise. They say some of these doctors are clever men, trained in universities far away, fluent in Latin, armed with all the knowledge books can hold. But here, standing in a candlelit cottage with the wet coughs echoing off the walls, all the Latin in the world feels as useful as a handful of rain. Sometimes they bleed you, a slice here, a cup there, to drain the poison. Or they press hot irons to the swellings, hoping fire might scare the plague away. Some smear foul-smelling ointments on your skin, thick and greasy, that stink up the house for days. But deep down, and maybe the doctor knows too, these tricks are mostly a way to pass the hours until the bell rings again. And yet, he keeps moving. Every day, every night, from house to house, door to door, a black shape in a mist, his mask bobbing like a bird of ill omen. Children peek out from behind barrels to glimpse him, then duck away, breathless with dread. The rats scatter when they hear his staff tap the cobblestones, as if they too know this figure means someone inside is next to go. Meanwhile, imagine this. You're the one who opens the door to him tonight. He stands on your threshold, taller than you expected, his glass eyes catching your reflection, your hair unwashed, your face hollow with worry. He nods once, doesn't bother to knock the mud from his boots. He steps inside. The door closes behind him with a soft, final thud. You want to believe he brings hope. But when he lifts that staff, you see the way his shoulders sag under the wax cloth. You see the truth. The beaked mask hides his fear as much as it hides his face. And outside, the village watches. Neighbors huddle at windows, pressing palms to the glass, whispering prayers as they watch him pass by. Some spit over their shoulders. Some clutch talismans at their necks. Some just turn away, as if not seeing him could change the fact that he'll return. Maybe tomorrow, maybe tonight, tapping that staff at their door. So keep the shutter closed now. Breathe in the musty sweetness of your blanket. Imagine the tap, tap, tap of his staff growing fainter as he moves on to the next house, and the next. The street grows quiet again. The mist swallows him whole. The only sign he was ever there, a line of muddy footprints that fade in the dawn. And you're still here. Safe. Listening. Wrapped up tight while the beaked doctor tends to the dying. Is mask a promise? Or a lie? Or maybe both? Stay close. Don't drift too far yet, because next we'll slip into a church where prayers hang heavy in the rafters and echo through cold stone. Prayers that sometimes, heartbreakingly, go unanswered, and the bell will keep ringing. Meanwhile, the bell keeps tolling. You hear it before you see the church. That low, mournful sound rolling through the village, slipping through the alleys like smoke under a door. It's a sound that makes mothers clutch their children tighter, makes old men close their eyes and whisper the names of the dead into cracked hands. Picture this: a small church perched on a rise at the edge of the village. Its walls are stone, rough and pitted from years of harsh winters and harder prayers. Moss clings to the base like a green beard, and the old wooden door, heavy iron-banded, creaks on its hinges every time it swings open to swallow another frightened soul. Step inside for a moment. Feel the sudden hush, the way the cold presses close, stone trapping every sigh, every breath. The air smells of tallow candles burning in brass holders, and a body's packed too close together. Somewhere, incense curls upward, sweet, sharp, but it's not enough to mask the reek of sickness that has seeped into the floorboards. Imagine slipping into a back pew, the wood worn smooth by centuries of knees and elbows. The people around you sit hunched, heads bowed, shoulders brushing, but they do not touch otherwise. Not anymore. Hands at once clasped in greeting now hide inside sleeves. Lips that once kissed cheeks now press only against knuckles in frantic, silent prayer. At the front, the priest stands under a wooden crucifix, its painted Christ pale and chipped. His robes hang heavy on his thin shoulders, so thin now. He too knows the stories that flicker from tongue to tongue, that the priest in the next town fell sick last week, that some say God does not answer prayers spoken through a trembling cough. His voice rises anyway, cracked and raw from hours spent chanting the same verses again and again. Latin words fill the rafters, bouncing off cold stone like lost birds searching for an exit. Miserere, miserere, have mercy. The people echo him in hoarse whispers. Some weep. Some just sit with eyes blank, lips moving out of habit, their minds already far from this dim sanctuary. And outside the stained glass, the rats scurry under the eaves, bold as sin. They know what waits behind the walls. The warmth of bodies too weak to fight them off. Maybe you hear their tiny feet patter on the roof as you bow your head. Maybe you pretend you don't. In the corner, a young woman lights a candle for her mother. Her fingers tremble so badly that wax drips on her sleeve. She doesn't notice. She crosses herself, mumbles a promise. Bring her back, please, bring her back. But the candle flickers, guttering like hope in the draft. Her mother is at home, feverish, lungs rattling like old doors in the wind. You can almost feel the heat of her skin, the damp bed sheets clinging like a shroud. Near the altar, an old man kneels alone. His knees creak against the stone. His breath wheezes in his chest. He clutches a scrap of parchment, a list of names, perhaps children and grandchildren, neighbors, friends. One by one, he lifts them up to the rafters, as if the echo of their names might find a shortcut to heaven. He knows the priest's voice might not be enough, so he offers his own, raw and cracking, to fill the gaps. And above it all, The stained glass windows shudder each time the wind hits them. Saints and angels frozen in bright colors, their painted eyes staring down. Do they listen? Do they judge? Or do they turn their heads when the plague sweeps through, leaving prayers unanswered like letters never sent? Meanwhile, the priest raises a censer, swinging it gently. Sweet smoke billows down the aisle, clinging to wool cloaks and hair and the soft sobs of a child curled against her father's side. The father strokes her hair, whispering that God will protect them. But his other hand trembles as he wipes a fresh cough from the corner of his mouth. Some slip out when they can't stand it anymore. Back into the cold, the smell of herbs and ashes, the rats waiting under the church steps. They breathe in the night as if it's cleaner than the air inside, though they know it isn't. But you stay a little longer. You listen to the way the prayers keep going, low and steady, like the hum of a beehive that no longer has honey. The bell tolls again. Another soul departed, maybe before the final blessing was whispered in his ear. So let the echo of those words linger in your mind. The flicker of candles, the wet cough hidden in a pew, the priest's voice rising and falling like the last wave on a stormy shore. Take another breath. The church doors stand open for the next grieving family. The stone walls shiver with every draft, and the prayers keep rising, but the answers don't always come. Stay close, stay warm, because next we'll slip into a house where a family gathers for what they don't know is their last meal together. A thin soup, a mother's trembling smile, and a secret fear they cannot speak aloud. The night is long yet, and you're not alone. Imagine a house, if you can really call it that, pressed against the edge of the village, half hidden behind a crooked fence and a tangle of frost-burned weeds. Its roof sags under the weight of another long, wet winter, and the single chimney coughs out a thin ribbon of smoke that the wind tears away before it can rise. Inside, there's a glow, not bright, but enough to push back the dark corners. The hearth crackles with an armful of damp wood, its smoke seeping through the stones because the chimney's half choked with soot. It smells like wet ash and cabbage and something sour underneath. The scent of bodies packed too close together for too many days. Picture this: a wooden table scuffed and scored by years of knives and elbows and worried fists. A thin cloth covers part of it, patched with bits of old linen that don't match. Bowls sit in front of each chair. Mismatched pottery, some chipped, some cracked, and hastily mended with resin. The bowls hold a soup so thin it's nearly water, flecks of wilted greens bobbing on the surface like rafts in a storm. A mother stands at the hearth, back hunched, stirring the pot with a wooden spoon so worn the handle is as smooth as river stone. Her hairs come loose, strands sticking to the sweat on her temples. She hums under her breath, an old lullaby, perhaps, or just a threadbare tune to keep her mind from slipping into the cracks. She ladles the soup carefully, careful not to look too long at how much is left, careful not to sigh. At the table, her children wait. 2 boys, shoulders touching, share a blanket draped across their knees. They lean into each other, watching the steam curl up from the bowls. Their cheeks are pale, eyes too big for their thin faces. Hunger does that. Fear does, too. One coughs softly into his sleeve. The mother flinches just for a heartbeat, then smooths her apron and forces a smile back on her lips. The father sits at the head of the table, elbows braced, head bowed. His hands are rough, the skin cracked and lined with dirt that never seems to wash away. He offers a few words of blessing, really, but his voice is flat, the words drifting like wood smoke to the rafters. He doesn't say, "Keep us safe," anymore. Just keep us. And even that feels too much to hope for. They eat in silence, mostly. The broth is salty and warm, but it does nothing to fill the hollow places inside them. Now and then, the mother coaxes a small smile from the youngest boy, pretending to scold him for slurping. He tries to giggle, but the sound catches in his chest and turns to a ragged cough that makes the father look away. On the table, near the mother's elbow, sits a single onion, its papery skin cracked. It's the last one. She fingers it absently, wondering if she should chop it into the pot tomorrow, if there will be a tomorrow worth stretching into. She thinks about the neighbor's wife who slipped out before dawn to beg the herbalist for garlic and never came back. Some say she collapsed by the roadside. Some say the rats found her first. Meanwhile, above their heads, the wind rattles the shutters. The thin walls creak like old bones, settling. In the loft overhead, dry herbs hang from beams. Sage, rosemary, sprigs of lavender, so brittle they crumble to dust at a touch. Their scents used to make the house smell hopeful. Now they just remind the mother of prayers that taste like smoke. Picture this. The mother catches her husband's eye. For a heartbeat, they share the same unspoken thought, the same fear they'd never dare say out loud in front of the children. What if this is the last meal they eat together? What if tomorrow there's an empty chair? Maybe two. She reaches for his hand under the table. He squeezes back, just once, the warmth of his skin, all the comfort he can give. And the children, do they know? The oldest boy chews the edge of his bread, eyes drifting to the window where a sliver of moon shows through a crack in the shutter. He remembers when he used to hear music on nights like this. The neighbors laughing, a fiddle squealing, the good kind of squeal. Now, the village hums with the wrong sounds. Coughs, the creak of carts carrying the dead, the quiet scrape of a shovel at midnight. When the bowls are empty, the mother wipes each child's mouth with the corner of her apron. She brushes their hair back with trembling fingers, kisses their foreheads like she can seal them shut from the plague that prowls outside. She hums that lullaby again, just under her breath, even though they're too old for lullabies. Or maybe no one's ever too old when death is at the door. The father adds another log to the fire, though the woodpile is down to splinters. He sits back in his chair, watching the flames lick the soot-dark stones. In the flicker, they all look softer, like they might survive the night. Like the world beyond these four thin walls might hold off just a little longer. So let yourself drift there, too, in this hush of soup bowls and whispered prayers, the warmth of a fire that tries so hard to hold back the cold. You're here with them just for tonight. Safe enough, fed enough, loved enough, until the first cough breaks the silence again. Sleep now if you can. Stay close, because next, the rumors swirl thicker than the smoke, and the villagers will do anything to keep the poison at bay. Herbs, smoke, strange rites whispered at thresholds. The superstitions begin to bloom. Step into the street again. Feel how the night has thickened. The mist clings to your hair, seeps into the sleeves of your cloak, and under it all, there's the sweet, sour smell of burning herbs that never seems to leave your nose. The village is changing. You can feel it in the hush behind doors, the eyes that peer out from half-open shutters, the way people cross themselves twice now when they pass the church. Picture this. A row of cottages huddled shoulder to shoulder like nervous children in the dark. Outside, each door hangs a bunch of something. Sometimes rosemary tied with fraying twine, sometimes lavender long past its bloom. Some houses have garlands of garlic braids looped around door frames like sagging necklaces. The bulbs swing in the breeze, their papery skins rustling like dry whispers. And the smoke. It's everywhere now. Step close to any cottage, and you'll find a small iron cauldron or a cracked clay pot, perched just outside the threshold. Inside, a handful of herbs smolder, sending up thin ribbons of gray that sting your eyes and settle into your hair. Rosemary, sage, sometimes a few dried rose petals for hope, though hope feels expensive these days. The smoke curls under doorways, around windowsills, worming its way into every crack where they think the poison might slip through. Imagine an old man hunched on his doorstep, muttering to himself as he feeds dried mint into the little brazier at his feet. He rocks back and forth on the stoop, humming a tune that no one remembers anymore, except maybe him. Every now and then, he spits over his shoulder, once to banish the evil, aye, twice for the plague, 3 times for the devil himself. You watch the spittle glisten on the muddy stones and wonder if he believes it works, or if it just feels good to do something, anything, when a world feels so thin and breakable. Meanwhile, in the alley behind the baker's house, a woman stands barefoot in the mud, scratching symbols into the wooden door with a blunt knife. Her knuckles are raw. Her breath shows in puffs that curl around the blade. When she's done, she presses her forehead to the marks, crosses and circles, half-remembered charms from her grandmother's stories. She whispers a name into the grain of the wood. Her daughter's name, sick upstairs, cheeks burning like coals. She ties a sprig of yarrow to the door handle for good measure, a final ward against the thing they cannot see. And oh, the stories they tell each other now. How vinegar will keep your lungs clear, how carrying a pouch of wormwood in your pocket will turn death away at the gate. They rub onions on their door frames, bury salt at the corners of the house, hang tiny mirrors in windows so the plague will see itself and flee. Children are given amulets of bone and bits of red ribbon to pin inside their sleeves. Some sleep with knives under their pillows, sharp edges turned toward the window, just in case. Listen close as you pass these houses. You'll hear them whispering, trading remedies like secrets. A neighbor leans over a fence, her voice low and urgent. Boil nettles in vinegar. Breathe the steam through a cloth. Another swears by dried marigold petals tucked under the tongue before sleep. Does it help? No one knows. But in the dark, doing something feels better than lying still. Meanwhile, the smoke thickens. It creeps down the lane, carrying with it the ghosts of all these old beliefs. Half prayer, half witchcraft. All hope stretched thin as spider silk. It curls around the well where children once played. It seeps under barn doors where the cows shift uneasily. Noses lifted as if they too can smell the fear. Imagine a boy, no older than 10, standing at his window, watching his mother pile sweet herbs onto the fire. He rubs sleep from his eyes, presses his hand to the cold glass, and wonders if the smoke will be enough to keep the shadows out. He whispers to himself, the way his grandmother taught him. Smoke for the air, salt for the earth, iron for the heart. His voice cracks on the last word, but he says it anyway. The wind shifts. The smoke drifts and curls like a living thing. Somewhere, a cat yowls and darts into an alley. A rat squeaks under a pile of wood, eyes catching the lantern light for a heartbeat before it disappears. And still, the villagers feed their fires, bundle after bundle of precious herbs that might have flavored stews or healed small wounds in kinder seasons, now sacrificed to the hope that the plague hates the smell of rosemary more than it loves the taste of flesh. So stand here with me, just for a moment, in this hush of superstition and smoke. Feel the heat of the little fires, the prick of herbs against your fingers if you dare to reach out. Breathe it in, the acrid sweetness that scratches the back of your throat, makes your eyes water, makes you wonder if maybe, just maybe, it works. And then step back. Wrap your blanket tighter. The night presses close. The rumors keep growing, like weeds no smoke can burn away. Stay near. Rest easy, because next, the village streets will fall silent, one by one. Doors will close. Windows will shutter. And you'll see what an empty street really feels like. A hush so deep you could hear death's footfall if you dare to listen. But for now, drift. You're safe, here in the dark. The smoke curls around you too, a charm, a promise, a small, flickering lie. Step out from the swirl of herb smoke, away from the low murmurs behind shuttered doors. The air is colder here, colder than you expect, as if the warmth of human breath has been sucked away, leaving only the damp chill of cobblestones and fog. You stand at the edge of the main lane, the village's single, crooked spine, and you realize how quiet it has become. So quiet, you can hear your own heartbeat. So quiet, you catch the distant rattle of a shutter that someone forgot to latch. Picture this. Houses hunched low, like old men stooped over their fears. Roofs thatched and sagging with rain. Windows so small they look like squinting eyes. Eyes that once held candlelight and laughter and the bright smell of bread baking. Now the shutters are drawn tight, the cracks stuffed with rags. Behind every plank, people sit in the hush, pretending that shutting out the wind can shut out what rides on it. Once, these streets were never empty. Before the plague slipped in like a thief through an unlatched door, you'd hear the bark of dogs chasing chickens through the mud. Children's laughter, the shriek of iron on iron at the blacksmith's forge. Pigs squealing in pens, water splashing in buckets carried from the well. Life, loud and rude and stubborn. But now nothing. The well stands alone, its ropes swaying in the wind like a hanging rope with no neck to hold. The troughs are dry. The butcher's block outside the shop is gray and cracked. The smell of old blood faded into the wood. No fresh cuts laid out for barter. No housewives haggling with baskets on their hips, cheeks pink from the cold. If you listen close, there's still life here, but it's small and secret. A rat, bold as any king, skitters across the lane, belly dragging in the slush. He pauses under a cart that hasn't moved in weeks, sniffing the air, no boots to chase him away. Farther along, a stray dog noses at a pile of ashes behind a tavern. His ribs press against his matted fur with every breath. But even he moves silently, paw pads leaving wet ghosts on the stone. Meanwhile, a door opens, just a crack, and a face appears pale and pinched. A woman squints into the street, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. She holds her breath, listening for footsteps that don't come. Then, quick as a whisper, she tosses something out, a basin of dirty water that splashes against the cobblestones and trickles into the gutter. The door slams again. The latch clicks, and the silence rushes back in to fill the space where a voice might once have been. Imagine standing in the center of this hush, boots planted in the mud that never dries. Look up. Washing lines sag between upper windows, limp with sheets no one will bother to take in. One flaps lazily in the breeze, snapping once, twice, before settling back to stillness. A rooster crows in the distance, sounding confused, as if it too can sense that its kingdom has shrunk to empty lanes and shuttered homes. And yet, you can feel the village breathing. It's not dead, not yet, but its heartbeat is muffled. Behind every door, someone coughs softly into a blanket, hoping the neighbors won't hear. Someone kneels by a straw mattress, whispering the same prayer they whispered yesterday and the day before. And the day before that. They wait for the knock, the doctor's staff, the grave cart's wheels, the church bells toll. Sometimes a single figure braves the street. Picture him now, an old man wrapped in a patchwork cloak, eyes cast down as he shuffles from one door to the next. In his arms, he carries a sack of kindling, gathered from the edge of the woods where the plague is said to hide in the bark and moss. He knocks softly, leaves a handful at a doorstep, mutters a blessing that sounds like an apology. Then he moves on, footsteps swallowed by the mist before they can echo twice. The village seems to hold its breath. The air is thick with things unsaid, with memories of when the streets rang with gossip, arguments, laughter. Now, they belong to the rats and the wind. And the wind doesn't care if your name is remembered. Imagine drifting through this hush, your feet stirring the damp straw scattered to soak up the filth. You pause at the crossroads where a wooden post stands crooked. Once people would nail notices here, a wedding, a harvest fair, a missing goat. Now, there's just a scrap of parchment flapping limply, ink smudged by rain. Beware the plague. Keep your children inside, as if the parchment could do what prayers and herbs and smoke could not. So here you stand, wrapped in your blanket, listening to a street that is not truly empty, only waiting. It holds its secrets behind bolted doors, behind shuttered windows, behind the hush that lets you hear the small, soft sounds the living make when they're afraid to be heard. Stay close now. Let the quiet settle into your bones like an old story you half remember. The streets will stay empty tonight, but somewhere the ground keeps shifting and the dead still need a place to sleep. Because next, we'll follow the shovel to where the earth opens up. Too shallow, too hurried, a grave that fills faster than any prayer can hold it shut. Sleep now if you can. You're safe in this silence. The plague can't touch you here. Not tonight. Follow the path out of the village, where the houses thin and the fields lie ragged and trampled under the wet, gray sky. The road here is little more than ruts carved by cartwheels, puddles collecting in every dip. Sometimes we'll get stuck, half swallowed by the muck, but no one complains anymore. No one has the breath to waste on curses. Picture this, a small patch of land behind the old churchyard. Once, it was a meadow where children picked wildflowers, tiny fists wrapped around stems sticky with sap. In spring, they'd chase each other through the tall grass, shrieking at the bees. Now, that grass lies flat, trampled by boots and the weight of grief. It smells of churned up soil, cold and sharp, and under it, a sweetness that turns your stomach when the wind shifts. At the edge of this field stands a man. He is the grave digger. He does not wear a beaked mask or chant Latin prayers. He wears a battered hat pulled low, a scarf wound twice around his nose and mouth, more for the stench than for superstition. His hands are big and raw, knuckles cracked from the frost and the endless scraping of spade on stone. Watch him for a moment. How he plants his boots on the edge of the pit he's dug. How he shifts his weight, one foot to the other, like a sailor on an unsteady deck. The grave yawns beneath him, barely 3 feet deep. There is no time, you see, no time for the good, deep graves that hold a body tight and safe from wandering dogs or the scrape of curious rats. Now, the earth opens just wide enough to swallow, not enough to keep. Imagine the sound of the shovel. The dull scrape as it bites the earth, lifts it out in heavy clumps. The breath that huffs through the scarf with each heave. He works alone. Once the priest would stand beside him, muttering blessings, sprinkling holy water over the hole. But the priest's voice is hoarse these days, busy with the living. So the gravedigger mutters to himself instead. Small words, old words, not all in Latin, and not all remembered right. Nearby a cart waits. Its wheels are caked with mud that has never had time to dry. In the bed of the cart lies a shape. A man, maybe 30, maybe 50. The lines of hardship and hunger have made the years blur. He's wrapped in a stained blanket that hides most of him, except for a bare foot that peeks out, gray and limp. No coffin. Not anymore. Coffins are for the rich or the lucky, and luck has fled these fields like birds before a storm. The gravedigger pauses, wipes his brow with the back of his glove, glances at the shape in the cart. He remembers this one, a man who used to mend roofs, patch holes where the rain slipped in. He fixed the gravedigger's own cottage once, and they'd shared a jug of sour ale afterward, laughing at the creak of old beams. That feels like a dream now. The gravedigger hums an old tune under his breath as he bends to the cart. Not a hymn, just a work song his father taught him when he was a boy with no idea how deep a grave could feel. Picture this. He rolls the body out, careful not to let it fall too hard. The shape lands with a soft thud in the shallow pit. There's no shroud, no final words, no family gathered around. They're sick at home, or dead already, or too afraid to come near. The earth is his only witness. He picks up the spade again. The first clod of soil lands on the blanket with a muffled slap. Another. If you listen, you can almost hear the sound of it. The dirt pattering down, the weight pressing the body flat, the grave slowly sealing its mouth around what it's been given. Meanwhile, the wind sighs through the bare trees that stand at the edge of this field. Their branches rattle like bones, but bones do not weep, and neither does the gravedigger. His breath fogs and cold. He shifts his shoulders, driving the spade in deeper, faster. The grave is shallow, but the day is shorter still. There are others waiting, more carts, more blankets, more goodbyes that sound like nothing at all. When the last of the earth has been patted down, a mound that the rain will flatten by morning, he presses a single stone at the head, notched with a mark only he will remember. There will be no cross, no name carved into wood. Just this, a patch of dirt, a memory that fades as fast as frost under sunlight. Imagine standing there with him for a moment. Feel the cold seep up through the soles of your boots. Hear the squelch of mud, the caw of a crow that circles overhead, waiting for what might come next. The gravedigger leans on his spade, shoulders rounded, staring down at the fresh mound as if it might speak back. It doesn't. He turns away at last, wipes his hands on his coat, lifts the handles of the cart, and pulls it back toward the lane, the wheels catching on every stone, every rut. The pit lies quiet behind him, too shallow, too hurried, but enough for tonight. So breathe now. Let the hush of this field fill your chest. The earth takes what it takes, and when it can hold no more, it takes again. And still, the bell will toll tomorrow, calling him back with his spade and his weary song. Stay close. Stay warm. Because next, someone will walk these lanes with a bell of their own, ringing out a warning, step by step, so the living know how close the dead still walk beside them. Rest now. There's more to see, and you're not alone. Meanwhile, the graveyard settles into its hush, but the village never really sleeps. Not properly. Not anymore. It waits, half awake, listening for that sound. A dull, rhythmic clang that means death has come calling, but with a warning first. A polite rattle of metal, so you have just enough time to bar your door and whisper your last prayers. Picture this. Dawn creeping in under a bruised sky. A watery smear of light that can't quite push away the cold. The mist rises off the fields, clings to the cottages, slips into the folds of blankets where children dream uneasy dreams. And through it all, the bell rings. At first, it's faint, just a distant ding, as if someone has dropped a pod in the next lane. But then it grows louder, closer. The clang is steady, the same note over and over. No rush in its rhythm, no panic in its tone. Just a reminder, one more gone, make way, make way. Imagine him now, the bell ringer. He's not a priest. He's not a doctor. He's not even that old, though the lines on his face say otherwise. Maybe 20, 25, a young man with shoulders stooped like an old mule's. He wears a cloak too big for him, patched at the elbows, the hem soaked from trudging through slush and gutter water. In one hand, he carries a small iron bell, its handle wrapped in cloth to keep it from freezing to his skin. Listen, ding, ding, ding. He walks slowly, pausing every few steps to lift the bell and shake it, the metal clapper knocking against the side with a flat, tired sound. In the other hand, he drags a handcart behind him, 2 splintered wheels, an old axle that creaks like a toothless jaw. The cart is empty, for now. But you know what it's for? Everyone does. The villagers call him the collector, though he never collects anything he wants to keep. He walks these lanes every morning, every night, sometimes in the dull hush of afternoon when the light slants through the mist like a blade. Sometimes he hums to himself, a tune he can't quite remember the words to, something his mother used to sing when he was small enough to sit on her lap. Before the fever took her too, picture him stopping at a door. A mark is smeared on the wood, a crude red cross, maybe still tacky to the touch. He knows this house. He remembers the girl who used to peek at him from the window when he was smaller, back when they tossed stones into the creek together. He stands there for a moment, fingers tightening on the handle of the bell. Ding, ding, ding. He does not knock. He doesn't have to. Inside, a shape stirs. The father pushes open the door, eyes red from nights with no sleep. He does not speak. He does not weep. He just nods once, a small, broken thing, and steps aside so the collector can pass. Imagine the hush that follows. The creak of the cart's wheels as it rolls up to the doorway. The shuffle of the bell ringer's boots on the packed earth floor. A cough from somewhere deeper inside, where the living hold their breath and squeeze each other's hands. The shape is there, wrapped in a blanket that still smells faintly of smoke and rosemary. Light as a child, though once she ran barefoot through these lanes with mud on her ankles and a grin that made him blush when they were 10. He lifts her carefully. He tries not to think about the weight or the lack of it. He lays her in the cart, folding the blanket so her face is covered, safe from the sky, from the wind, from the gossip of crows perched on the roof beams. Back out on the lane, he rings the bell again. Ding, ding, ding. The sound echoes off the walls, slips under doors, drifts through windows cracked open for a breath of air that no one dares trust anymore. People peer through the slits in their shutters, eyes wide, hollow. They watch the cart roll past, the small shape under the blanket shifting with each bump in the road. Some cross themselves, fingers trembling. Some mutter prayers they only half believe in. Some turn away altogether, pressing their foreheads to the door frame, ashamed that it isn't them. Not yet. Meanwhile, the bell ringer hums again. A broken tune. The cart rattles. The iron bell swings at his side. He will do this again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, until the bell falls silent for him too. He wonders, sometimes, if anyone will ring it for him. If someone will remember the boy who once skipped stones in the creek before he traded laughter for a bell's mournful clang. Picture the village behind him, doors bolted, windows dark. The hush is so thick it feels alive. In that hush, the sound of the bell becomes a heartbeat for those too scared to sleep. A promise and a threat in equal measure. Death is close, but for now, it walks with him, and you have one more night to hold your breath and hope. So stand here with me, just a moment longer. Let the echoes settle in your bones. Ding, ding, ding. The cart creaks on. The bell ringer shuffles down the muddy lane, into the mist that swallows him whole. Stay close. Rest your eyes if you need to. The lanes will still be here when you wake, because next we'll slip inside a house again, where a child's whisper carries through the dark, soft and secret, like a promise too small for grown-ups to hear. And the bell will keep ringing. Step inside a house that sits low to the ground, its thatch patched with bits of burlap and tar, a crooked chimney that breathes smoke in slow, ragged sighs. From the street, you'd never guess how many hearts beat inside these thin walls. How many hopes press close together under a roof that leaks when the rain gets stubborn. Push the door open just a crack. The hinges whine, a sound too loud for a house that wants to keep its secrets. Inside, the shadows are thick. The fire has burned low on the hearth, sending up more smoke than warmth. A single stub of candle guttering on the table. It drips wax onto a plate, so scratched it barely remembers it was once white. Near the fire, on a straw-stuffed mattress, lies a boy. 10, maybe 11, but his cheeks are sunken, his lips cracked like river mud in summer drought. He stares at the ceiling, eyes wide and glassy, tracing shapes only he can see in the flicker of the flame. His mother sits at his side, her hand moving in small, frantic circles over his brow, trying to wipe away a fever that clings like a second skin. Her own face is drawn, shadows under her eyes where dreams used to live. Beside him, on the floor where the blanket slides over the cold planks, sits his little sister. She's 5, thin knees tucked to her chest, chin resting on the knobs of bone that poke through her nightshirt. Her hair's a tangle of curls that catch the firelight like copper wire. In her lap, she holds a rag doll, nothing more than scraps of cloth stitched into a shape that once made her giggle when the world felt safe. Picture this. The boy coughs, a rattling gasp that makes the mother close her eyes, lips moving on a prayer she's whispered so many times it no longer sounds like a word. The sister shifts closer, pressing her cheek to the boy's arm. She hums, off-key, soft, a lullaby she half remembers, the tune learned from the same mother, now too tired to sing. Then, the boy turns his head, eyes glimmering like wet stones in the firelight. He looks at her, this tiny girl curled beside him, and his lips crack open just enough to push out a whisper. "If I close my eyes," he rasps, voice so small the air barely carries it. "Mom will come back, yeah?" The sister nods, even though Mama is right there. Her mother, their mother, a ghost already while still alive, skin gray, hands trembling. The sister leans in close. "Close him tight," she says, fierce in the way children can be when they still believe they have magic in their bones. Tighter than tight. Mom will stay if you don't peek. Her tiny hand pats his cheek, a child's promise against a plague that listens to no one. Outside, the wind rattles the shutter, a wooden board that holds back more than the cold. It holds back the bell ringer's echo, the scratch of rat claws in the alley, the hush of neighbors too afraid to speak the boy's name aloud. But inside, the whisper hovers in the air like the warmth of the dying fire. Small, defiant, sweet. Meanwhile, the mother presses a cloth to the boy's lips when the cough returns, rough and wet, flecked with what no mother wants to see. She hums the same lullaby her daughter hums, two voices weaving a song thin as spider silk, trembling on the draft. She remembers when she sang it at his cradle, when she shushed him to sleep on nights when storms battered the roof, back when she still believed a mother's voice was stronger than any darkness. In the corner, the sister's doll tumbles from her lap. It lands near the hearth, one button eye staring up at the cracked beams overhead. The girl doesn't notice. She leans closer, breath warm on her brother's ear. "When you sleep," she whispers, "dream you're in the garden, Kay? Dream about flowers. Don't let the rats in. Don't let him in." She presses her finger to his lips, sealing the promise shut. Picture that tiny heartbeat of hope. Two children clinging to a world no one else can see. In that moment, the house feels like it holds its breath, too. The fire pops, sending a small shower of sparks up the chimney. Outside, the wind sighs through the thatch, rattles the door, searching for a crack wide enough to slip in. But here, in this hush of coughs and lullabies and a child's whispered wish, there's still a space untouched, a pocket of warmth where maybe, just maybe, sleep comes gently, dreams bloom behind eyelids sealed tight against the dark. So rest here a while, with them. Feel the straw rustle under thin blankets. Hear the soft hum of the song that means everything and nothing at all. The world beyond these four crooked walls can wait. The bell can wait. The grave can wait. For a heartbeat, a whisper is enough. Sleep if you can. Let your eyes drift shut like his, tighter than tight. Because next, we'll find the old herbalist hunched over her cluttered table, mixing bitter potions and desperate hope in equal measure. And outside, the rats keep scratching. But in here, you're safe. Picture this. A crooked cottage crouched at the edge of the village, where the road narrows to a muddy track that disappears into a tangle of hedges and blackthorn. It smells different here. Not the rank sweetness of burning herbs on doorsteps, but something sharper, greener, more alive than the rotting hush behind shuttered windows. The herbalist lives here, or maybe she's a witch, depending on who you ask when the wind is up and the moon is thin. She's old enough that no one remembers her young. Her back bends like a question mark over the heavy oak table that swallows half the room. Every shelf and rafter drips with bundles of dried things, sprigs of sage, brittle nettles, yellowed flowers that crumble to dust when the damp creeps in too far. Step inside. Feel the warmth slap your cheeks. The fire in her hearth never dies, fed by scraps of root and sticks from the forest that people say is haunted. The air tastes like vinegar and crushed garlic, rosemary and smoke, and something more bitter underneath, a scent that makes your tongue curl when you breathe it too deep. The herbalist's hands never stop moving, knotted knuckles stained with sap and the ghosts of 100 crushed petals. Her nails are cracked, her fingertips yellowed from the oils that seep from the bruised leaves she pounds into paste. She talks to herself, a low mumble like the creak of old floorboards. If you listen close, you'll hear a chant that sounds half like a prayer and half like a curse spat at the plague that slips under every door. On the table, jars jostle for space, some packed with scraps of dried root that rattle like bones, others holding cloudy oil that swirls with things you'd rather not name. There's a battered mortar and pestle, heavy as a stone heart. She grinds each pinch of bark and bud with the same care she might give a newborn baby or a corpse before its last shroud. Imagine a young man standing in the corner, hat clutched to his chest, eyes flicking from jar to jar. His boots leave wet prints on the clay floor, but the herbalist doesn't notice or doesn't care. He shuffles his feet, clears his throat. Is it ready? He whispers, like speaking louder might shatter the spell she's weaving. The old woman doesn't look up. Her spoon stirs a battered pot that simmers over the fire, a brew the color of ditch water, thick with floating bits of leaf and stem. It smells sharp enough to sting your eyes, so bitter it seems to coil on your tongue before you even taste it. She mutters, lifts a ladle, lets the liquid trickle back in with a hiss. Almost, she says, voice rough as bark. Hope takes time. He shifts again. His wife is waiting at home. Waiting, shivering, a rag soaked in fever sweat pressed to her brow. They've burned rosemary on the hearth, hung garlic from every beam, whispered prayers until their throats turned raw, but none of it worked. Now he's here, coins sweating in his palm, willing to trade tomorrow's bread for a promise he doesn't understand. The herbalist reaches for a small tin jar. She unscrews the lid with careful fingers, scoops out a greenish salve that smells like crushed mint and something darker, more medicinal. She folds a scrap of cloth around it, ties it tight with twine. Rub it on her throat, she says, her eyes catching the firelight like stones wet with rain. And here, she dips a small cup into the pot, pours the steaming brew into a battered flask. A sip at dawn, a sip at dusk. More than that, it'll rot her belly. He nods, lips parting like he wants to ask if it'll work. If she'll live long enough to see the snow melt, the garden bloom again, the market fill with apples and sweetbread, and everything this village has forgotten it used to taste. But the question dies on his tongue. Hope isn't something you say out loud here. Not anymore. She lifts her hand, rough palm pressing to his cheek. It smells like rosemary and old secrets. Her thumb traces a line just under his eye, wiping away the tears he didn't feel. "Go," she mutters, while the brew's warm. "And mind the rats." He tucks the flask under his coat, the jar deep in his pocket. He leaves a few dull coins on the table. Coins she'll feed to the fire when he's gone, because silver doesn't grow roots or flowers. The door creaks as he slips into the night, boots slapping the mud, hope clutched close to his ribs like a borrowed heartbeat. Meanwhile, the herbalist turns back to her table. She dips her fingers into a jar of salt, sprinkles a pinch into the brew, stirs counterclockwise 3 times, muttering under her breath. She doesn't know if it will help. Not really. But hope, she's learned, is like a weed. Cut it down, burn it back, bury it deep, and still it sprouts through cracks in the stones. Outside, the wind scratches at the thatch, carrying with it the distant rattle of the bell ringer's warning. But in here, the candle flickers on. The fire hums to itself. The old woman leans over her table and lifts another bundle of herbs, ready to grind out one more tiny prayer for the next desperate soul who find her door. So rest your eyes here just for a moment. Let the scent of crushed mint and vinegar drift through your thoughts. Imagine that tiny seed of hope tucked in your pocket, warm against your chest. Sleep if you can, because next, the village will seal itself shut behind walls meant to keep the plague out, but sometimes the walls just keep it in, and the candle burns on. Imagine standing on the muddy road that winds its way out of the village, or tries to, because not far from where the last thatched roofs lean into each other for warmth, the walls rise up. They are not grand, not the glittering ramparts of some proud city-state. These walls are squat, lichen-patched, older than most of the people who cling to them for protection. Picture them, uneven stones stacked one on another, moss and ivy creeping through the cracks like green veins. On a warm day, children would have scampered along the base, playing chase around the watchtower that leans just a little to the west. But now there is no laughter, no games, just the creak of the gates that groan like old bones when they swing shut at dusk. Inside, the village has become its own prison. The gates, heavy, iron-banded wood, streaked with rust, stay closed now. 2 guards stand watch, though their faces are hidden behind scraps of cloth tied over mouths and noses. Their eyes dart over every figure that approaches. They grip their halberds with hands raw and pink from too much scrubbing, too much fear that a single careless breath might slip through the cloth. Watch the people who come to the gate. A man with a bundle of faggots on his back begs to be let out. Says he must fetch more wood from the edge of the forest, or his children will freeze. The guards shake their heads, voices muffled behind their makeshift masks. No one in, no one out. A woman, wrapped in her husband's coat, pleads to leave, says her sister waits in the next town, a bed ready by the fire. But the guards know what comes through an open gate, and so they turn her away, their eyes dropping when she sinks to her knees in the mud, tears lost in the folds of wool pulled tight around her face. Meanwhile, a cart rattles up from the lower lane, the collector's cart, half full now, the shapes under blankets shifting as the wheels bump over stones. The guards step aside without a word, opening the gates just long enough for the gravedigger's boy to trudge through. His boots squelch in the mire, the iron bell tied to the cart's rail tapping out a dull rhythm that echoes against the stone. When he returns, the wheels will be lighter, but his shoulders heavier. Inside the walls, the village curls inward. People bar their doors with more than latches now. Whole beams dragged across thresholds, braced against door frames swollen from rain. Windows are nailed shut. Some families hang scraps of cloth soaked in vinegar over the glass, convinced it will catch the poison before it slips inside. They do not look at the gate anymore. They do not speak of what might lie beyond. But the walls do not keep the plague out. Not really, because by the time they locked the gate, it had already seeped in, hidden in the fur of rats, the breath of neighbors, the careless touch of a hand that once brushed your cheek by the well. The walls keep the living in, the dying closer, the rumor tighter in every alley and yard. Imagine walking the perimeter at dusk. The torches flicker on the parapet. The guards shuffle from one foot to the other, stamping to keep the blood flowing in their toes. Sometimes they swap stories of towns beyond these walls, towns where the plague has eaten every last door and turned fields into graves. Sometimes they lie to each other. It'll pass by winter, one mutters. It'll die with the frost. But they know better. You can hear it in the way their voices trail off, in the way they spit over the stones for luck. And beneath it all, the air hums with the things no one says out loud. That the walls are not a shield but a tomb. That stone can hold back a wolf or a thief, but not a sickness that rides the breath of every frightened heart locked inside. Picture a small boy standing on a barrel just inside the gate. He squints up at the battlements, his fingers tight around the wooden slats of the fence. He asks his father if he can climb to the top, to see what the world looks like beyond the stones. The father hushes him quickly, lifts him down, holds him so close the boy feels the tremble in his chest. There is no world beyond the walls now. Not for them. So you stand here, your hand pressed to the rough stones, cold and damp beneath your palm. Feel how the wall holds the night in, the fevered breath of the sick, the sharp scent of smoke, the hush of a village that wants to believe a wall can hold back the tide. Take another breath. Let out slow. You're safe, for now. Safer inside than out, they say. Though some nights, in the hush before dawn, you wonder if the gates will open again for you. Or if the plague will slip through the mortar cracks when you're not looking, find you anyway. Stay close. Don't drift too far, because next, when night falls and the gates hold firm, you'll hear the flicker of torches and the soft chant of footsteps. A procession of monks who pray for the dead, their voices a thin line of hope trailing through the dark. And the walls will stand, listening. Imagine the hush that falls when the bell ringer's echo fades, when the last shutter creaks shut for the night. The village seems to exhale, a single, fragile breath shared by every house crammed shoulder to shoulder behind the walls. The wind rattles the gates once or twice, testing the hinges, but the iron holds. And somewhere, high above, the moon drifts like a pale coin dropped into a dark well. Now listen. There, can you hear it? A faint shuffle of feet. The creak of leather straps, the dry rasp of robes brushing stone. It begins as a soft sigh against the silence, then grows, step by step, until it winds through the narrow lanes like a single black thread stitching the night together. Picture them, a line of monks moving two by two, each figure wrapped in a rough woolen habit the color of the stormy sky. Their hoods are pulled low, shadows where faces should be. They carry small lanterns, flames bobbing inside battered tin frames, throwing trembling halos of light onto the muddy cobbles. The wind slips around them, tugging at their sleeves, but they press on, heads bent, lips moving in a hush of Latin, so old it feels like the village's first language. At the front, one monk holds a wooden crucifix high enough to catch the flicker of each lantern they pass. It swings gently, carved edges worn smooth by generations of desperate hands. Its shadow dances across doorposts marked with red crosses, across the shutters nailed tight, across the eyes that blink open behind ragged curtains as the procession drifts by. Imagine the sound they make, sandals scuffing, beads clicking together at their waists, the creak of old leather where belts cinch robes against the cold. Their prayers rise and fall in waves. a chant half swallowed by the mist that curls between their feet. Miserere, miserere. Have mercy, they beg the dark. Mercy for the souls already gone. Mercy for those who lie awake behind those doors, coughing into the crook of an elbow that might betray them by dawn. Meanwhile, a mother kneels by her window, forehead pressed to the glass, so hard it chills her skin. She cups her hands around the flicker of the monks' lanterns as they pass, whispering her children's names into the gaps between the chants. On her straw pallet, her youngest stirs in sleep, a soft whimper on cracked lips, as if the prayers outside slip into his dreams like a balm. At the edge of the line, a young monk stumbles on the cobblestones, worn sandals slick with mud. He's new to this, his face barely a man's, lips chapped from nights chanting the same Latin phrases until they taste like blood. He looks up once, eyes catching the flicker of a shutter slammed shut. For a heartbeat, you can see the fear in him, the secret truth that the words on his tongue feel too thin to hold back a tide of darkness that does not listen. And yet the older monk at his side touches his sleeve, a silent reminder to keep moving, to keep praying, one foot in front of the other, one name after another. Sometimes faith is just a steady step when the world wants you to kneel. Behind them, the village holds its breath. Those too sick to stand strain to hear the words they half remember from Sundays long ago, back when the pews were full and the altar flowers fresh. Some whisper the chant too, lips moving in the hush under thin blankets that smell of sweat and rosemary. Others close their eyes, hoping the monk's words can find the souls they've lost. The mother gone too soon, the husband buried in a grave too shallow, the child whose cough went quiet before dawn. The procession winds past the church, its door cracked open just wide enough to catch the candlelight that spills down the steps like liquid gold. The priest stands there, a thin figure in his own dark robes, hand lifted in blessing. His voice is a ghost beside the stronger chants of the monks. He speaks the last rites for bodies he will never touch, for names he will never write in the parish book. Picture this: the line of lanterns drifting away through the mist, bobbing like small fireflies that have forgotten how to fly. Their light leaves behind a hush that sinks deep into the walls, a hush that clings even as the footsteps fade. And somewhere, high in the rafters aloft, a girl peeks through a crack in the thatch, watching the monks disappear into the dark. She presses her hand to her lips, tries to remember the chant, but all she can taste is the salt of her own breath, the warmth that proves she's still alive. For now, so stand here with me, in the chill of the lane where the monks have passed. Feel the hush they leave behind, the thin trail of hope stitched through the cold night. Listen to the echo of the words they left behind. Miserere, miserere. Mercy, mercy. Take another breath. Let it out slow. The procession drifts out of sight, but the hush lingers. Because next, the plague doesn't care for robes or prayers or holy walls. And in a grand house behind shuttered windows, the rich will find that gold and stone cannot keep it out. Sleep if you can. The monks are gone, but the night is long yet. Picture a manor house perched just inside the village walls, tall enough to peek over the crumbling stones, proud enough that the rats took a while to find the kitchen. Once, this house hummed with soft laughter, boots scraping across polished floors, a hall echoing with the rustle of silk skirts and servants who ducked their heads to hide a grin. Now it hums with something else, the hush of doors bolted shut from the inside. Step closer to the main door, thick oak, black iron hinges shaped like curling vines. A fresh cross painted across it, but the paint's so pale it could almost be chalk, as if they wanted to warn you, and yet pretend they didn't need to. A single candle flickers behind the window's wavy glass, warping the view like a dream that keeps slipping from your grasp. Inside, it's warmer than you'd expect, but not comfortable. The fire snaps in the grand hearth, logs spitting and cracking, the smell of resin and damp ash drifting into the high-beamed ceiling. Tapestries hang from the walls, thick velvet curtains drawn tight against any draft that might sneak in. The air tastes of rosemary and beeswax polish and stale breath, heavy from too many lungs and too little space. The nobleman stands near the fire, his back straight, one hand clamped around a goblet that sweats cold even as the flames paint gold on the wine surface. His hair is combed, those strands cling to his brow like a secret he can't quite brush away. He wears a fine coat, deep green velvet with gold thread at the cuffs, but the buttons strain at the collar where he's lost weight too quickly to adjust the seams. He lifts the goblet to his lips, holds it there but doesn't drink. The wine is good, a barrel from the coast, carried over rough roads by men he's since turned away at the gate. But it can't sweeten the taste in his mouth now. In the far corner, his wife sits in a carved chair, the kind that should belong at a feast, not here by the sickbed of her own child. Her hair is pinned in a neat coil that keeps coming loose. She twists it back up, over and over, each twist a prayer she no longer bothers to speak aloud. At her feet, a boy curls under blankets, so thick they look like they might swallow him whole. His breathing is shallow, each inhale catching like a splinter behind his ribs. His cheeks flush too bright, a red that doesn't match the warmth of the fire. Listen, the room holds its breath each time he coughs, the wet, rattling sound that makes the mother's shoulders flinch. She dips a cloth in a bowl of water that's gone cloudy with rosemary and vinegar. She dabs at his forehead, her lips pressed thin. She could be humming, but the sound never leaves her throat. Servants hover in the hall beyond the door, though fewer than before. Some slipped away in the night, cloths tied over their mouths, promises of coin forgotten as they fled past the gate. Those who stay keep to the shadows, faces hidden, voices pitched low. They bring trays of thin broth, the smell of garlic and stale bread drifting up the stairwell like a memory of kitchens now silent. They burn herbs in small braziers in every room, though the scent turns sour when mixed with fever sweat and fear. Meanwhile, the nobleman crosses to the window. He lifts the curtain just an inch, enough to glimpse the empty street beyond, the flicker of a lantern swinging on its iron hook at the gate. He thinks of his lands beyond the walls, acres of orchards, rows of vines now pruned by hands he barely remembers shaking. He thinks of the gold locked in his strongbox under the stairs, the jewels hidden behind a panel in the wardrobe upstairs. He thinks of how none of it is heavy enough to pin the plague outside these walls. His wife's voice drifts to him, cracked but soft. He's warm, she says, like it's a promise that warmth means living, that warmth means tomorrow. He doesn't answer. He lets the curtain fall back into place, sealing out the mist, sealing in the stale breath they all share. Upstairs, other rooms stand locked. Rooms where the windows are nailed shut, where the door frames are stuffed with cloth soaked in vinegar, where soft coughs echo against plaster and silk. Cousins, old uncles, guests who arrive too late to turn back. They sleep on linen sheets, tucked under fur blankets, but they dream the same dreams as the woodcutter's wife who lies on straw behind Shutter Cottage. The plague does not care for velvet or gold thread or the smell of good wine. Picture this. A maid stands by the door, shoulders hunched, hands folded so tightly the knuckles shine white in the firelight. She watches the boy, watches the nobleman, the mother, the curtained window. She thinks of her own child, 2 streets away, behind walls not half so thick. She prays that her coin will keep the herbalist's door open, that the potion she bought with her last silver will keep her daughter's cough soft enough to stay hidden. In the hush of this grand house, the logs shift in the hearth. a crack that sounds like a cough, like a door slamming shut. The nobleman lifts the goblet again, stares at the wine. He wants to believe it tastes like safety, like power, like something the plague cannot stain. But when he sips, it tastes like ashes. So rest here a moment. Feel the heat that never quite warms the bone. Smell the rosemary curling in the brazier, sharp and clean, masking nothing. Watch the child's chest rise and fall under too many blankets. Listen for the cough that reminds them all the gates can shut as tight as they want. The plague already found a way inside. Stay close. Let your eyes drift if you need to, because next we'll slip into the house that no one dares visit. The one marked with a red cross so thick the paint drips like blood down the door. A plague house. A hush so deep even the rats tread lightly. Sleep if you can. The walls will stand. But the plague doesn't knock. It walks in when it pleases. Follow the lane that curves away from the manor's stone walls, past shuttered windows where no candle flickers now. The mist thickens as you walk, clinging to your hair, beating on your lashes. Somewhere a dog howls, a low, mournful note that dies as quickly as it was born. It's the only sound, save for the distant scrape of rats under the eaves. Ahead, the cottage stands small and hunched, as if the roof is ashamed to lift its head. The door is marked with a red cross so wide and crude the paint has dripped down the boards, leaving rust-colored trails that look too much like blood when a moon catches them right. No one knocks here anymore. No one comes by with baskets of bread or small coins tucked into linen. This is a place left to its own hush. Step closer. Press your ear to the door. Listen. There's life inside still, though it clings like the last flame in a guttering candle. You can hear it in the wet rattle of a cough that scrapes at the plaster walls, in the faint creak of a chair leg shifting on the dirt floor, in a whisper of a lullaby so soft you can't catch all the words. Push the door open, slowly, gently, let it sigh on its hinges. The room is dim, lit only by the embers of a dying hearth. Smoke curls along the beams overhead, drifting through a gap in the thatch where the wind slips in. It smells of old ashes, sweat that's turned sour, and the stale tang of fear that soaks into every blanket and bundle of straw. Picture this. A mother kneels by a low pallet, her skirt pulled around her knees in the cold dirt. Her hands move in small circles over her daughter's hair. Hair so fine and limp it clings to her forehead like wet threads. The girl's face glows in the red wash of the fire, cheeks flushed in a way that has nothing to do with warmth. Each breath rattles up her throat, pauses, then fights its way out again like it might decide to stop at any moment. In the corner, a boy, older barely, sits on a three-legged stool, his arms wrapped around his knees. He doesn't look at his sister. He watches the crack in the wall instead, the one where the rats slip through if you're not quick with your traps. His eyes are wide, the whites showing clear in the firelight. Every so often, he presses a knuckle to his mouth to keep the sound inside him, the sound of fear, of grief too big for a child's chest. Meanwhile, the mother hums. Her voice is hoarse, thin as the wind that creeps under the door. She doesn't sing the words anymore. They're lost somewhere in the dry ache of her throat. But the tune is enough, she tells herself. The tune will hold her girl here. The tune will bind her to this small, sagging house, at least until the sun rises. And maybe, just maybe, the fever will break before then. Look around. This is no rich man's room, no grand manor with velvet drapes and servants hovering in the dark. A single pot hangs over the hearth, its bottom scorched from too many days, scraping broth from the last bones left in the yard. On the windowsill, a sprig of rosemary wilts in a cracked cup. They say it keeps the bad air out, but the air here turned bad long ago. The day the father's cough went silent. The day the neighbors stopped knocking. On the far wall, a scrap of cloth hangs nailed above the door. A charm, they say. Threads of red and black twisted together. A handful of dried flowers knotted in the center. It shivers when the wind stirs. But its promise feels as hollow as the belly of the boy who hasn't eaten since yesterday's crust of bread. Picture the mother's hand on the girl's cheek. Her thumb brushing a fevered temple, the skin hot enough to burn. She remembers the child's first steps on this floor, the soft giggle when she learned to chase chickens out the door. She remembers braiding that hair into two neat ropes, tying it with scraps of ribbon that once matched a Sunday dress. A dress folded now at the bottom of a chest they won't need to open again. Outside, the wind knocks at the shutter, rattles it on its hinges. A rat scrambles under the thatch, its claws clicking like tiny bones. The boy lifts his head, eyes darting to the door, but he knows no one will come. No doctor in a beaked mask. No priest with his murmured Latin. No neighbor with broth or bread. A house marked with a red cross stands alone, its breath growing fainter with every hour. And yet, listen, the mother keeps humming. She bends low, lips brushing her daughter's forehead, skin damp with sweat and the salt of prayers too old to name. She whispers a promise she doesn't believe. Tomorrow, you'll sit by the fire again. Tomorrow, the fever will be gone. Tomorrow, the word trembles in the rafters, floats like smoke that never finds the chimney. So stand here a moment, quiet as the mice in the wall. Feel the warmth that tries to linger in the hollow of that small room. Watch the embers pulse and fade, each spark a heartbeat that fights the dark for just one more moment. Sleep if you can. The plague house is not your house tonight. You stand on the threshold only long enough to understand. Then you slip back into the night, leaving the mother to her lullaby, the child to her ragged breath, the boy to his watch by the crack in the wall. Stay close. Keep your blanket tight around your shoulders, because next we'll drift to where the river runs, carrying what the grave cannot hold, what the earth grows too weary to keep buried. And the wind will carry the whisper of prayers that couldn't keep the door closed. Follow the narrow path that winds behind the old churchyard. The same path the gravedigger trudges when the plots grow too shallow, the soil too stubborn to swallow what must be hidden from sight. The earth, you see, has grown weary. Each shovel of dirt fills too quickly with the next name on the bell ringer's lips. So, the river waits. Imagine standing at its bank now, the moon silvering the sluggish current, the reeds whispering secrets to the night air. The river isn't wide, but it's deep enough to hold what the ground spits back. It moves slow, a black ribbon threading through the misty fields, carrying with it the echoes of the village's hush. Look there, where the bank slopes low and muddy, churned with footprints that come at dusk and never return by dawn. A cartwheel rut here, half sunk in the muck. A spade left leaning against a rotting stump, its handle sticky with the night's damp. Sometimes the villagers come in twos, faces hidden behind scraps of cloth that slip down when they breathe too fast from the weight they carry. Sometimes they come alone, pulling a makeshift sledge, the bundle on it wrapped in old linen, a shape that was once a mother, a brother, a child. Picture this: a man, a farmer, shoulders bent under a lifetime of carrying burdens he never chose, wades knee-deep into the shallows. He holds a bundle close to his chest, the fabric thin enough to show the curve of a spine, the shape of a hand frozen in a final grasp. He lowers it gently, almost lovingly, into the river's hungry mouth. The current folds around it, takes it slow at first, a lover's kiss on cold flesh. Then it drifts out, away, until the shape becomes a shadow that slides beneath the reeds and out of sight. He does not watch it go. He kneels in the shallows, water lapping at his thighs, his boots lost somewhere in the mud behind him. He mutters words, not Latin, not the church's mercy, but old words his grandmother whispered over cradles and sickbeds. Words that smell of salt and soil. Words that promise nothing except that the dead will not rise to knock at his door again. Upstream, where the moonlight shivers through the leafless branches, you can see the slow bob of more shapes caught in the reeds. Bits of cloth snag on roots, a pale foot slipping out from under a knot of blanket. The river keeps what it can, carries the rest away. The villagers tell themselves that the current runs far enough to wash the sickness downstream, to the sea, to the places no one speaks of when they gather what's left of the harvest. Meanwhile, the gravedigger's boy stands at the edge of the bank. His breath fogs the night, curls around his bare fingers. He knows the ground behind the churchyard cannot take another body. He knows the priest's blessing stretches only so far before the words fray and snap like old rope. So, he watches the river do what the earth can't. He waits until the last ripple smooths back into black glass, then wipes his hands on his coat and trudges back up the bank. He never tells his mother where he's been. The reeds murmur when the wind picks up, rustling dry secrets into the fog. Sometimes, when the moon is just so, people swear they see faces drifting under the surface. Eyes open, hair streaming like weeds, mouths half-parted as if they're about to speak. They say the river hums with the words the plague has stolen. Names no grave marker will hold. No parish book will keep ink for long. And yet, the village sleeps with its back to this water. They bar their doors, burn their rosemary, whisper their prayers. But they do not speak of the river. They do not ask where the gravedigger's boy goes when the carts creak down this narrow path at dusk. They do not want to know which shape the current carries next. So stand here for a moment, boots sinking in the mud at the bank's edge. Listen to the soft slap of water against bundled cloth, the hush of reeds bowing under secrets too heavy for the air. Feel the cold mist on your cheeks, the weight of every name the river holds pressed against your ribs. Sleep if you can. Let your thoughts drift like those shapes caught in the current. Out away, past the fields and walls and gates that pretend they can hold anything in. The river knows better. The river always does. Stay close now, because next we'll slip back into the heart of the village, where a single candle burns all night in a window, a promise that one mother keeps watch when no one else will. And the river hums on, whispering its lullaby beneath the reeds. Imagine the village from above, roofs huddled together like old friends trying to keep the cold out, thin chimneys bleeding wisps of smoke into the night air that curls around them like a cat that never purrs. There's a hush so deep you can hear the small sounds. A dog's faint whimper under a cart, the squeak of a shutter that never learned how to close properly, the shuffle of a rat through an abandoned woodpile. And there, do you see it? One window, near the crooked end of a lane that once led to the marketplace. A single square of warm light, wavering behind warped glass. You might miss it if you blink, but if you look closer, you'll see it's not just a candle, it's a promise. Step closer now. This house is nothing special from the outside. Its thatch droops like a tired hat, the door patched with bits of scrap wood where fists have pounded too hard over the years. The garden is nothing more than frozen stubble now. The last cabbages pulled weeks ago, the soil turned and blessed with salt to keep the plague from crawling in on the roots. But inside it hums with a different kind of hush. Not the hush of fear or final prayers, but the hush of someone who refuses to sleep when the rest of the world turns its back. Picture this. A mother sits by the window, back bent over her mending. Her candle flickers low, the tallow a stub that should have burned out an hour ago. But she tends it with careful fingers, pinching the wick, shifting the saucer closer to the drafty pane so the light shines just far enough to spill onto the lane outside. She keeps it there every night now, a beacon for eyes that might be watching from the dark, for souls too tired to knock but desperate enough to see that tiny flame and think, I am not forgotten. She's not young. The lines on her face are carved deep, the corners of her mouth turned down in the way a mouth settles when it's said too many goodbyes. Her hands are rough, the skin raw from soap that never quite cuts the sickness from cloth. She stitches a tear in her daughter's shawl, thread so thin it snaps twice before she gets the knot right. The girl sleeps nearby, curled on a straw pallet by the hearth. Her breathing is soft. No cough tonight, at least not yet, so the mother keeps the stitch moving as if her needle holds back the shadows pressing at the door. Now and then, she glances out the window. The glass is smudged with the touch of her fingertips, prints from nights before when she leaned in too close, eyes squinting through the mist to see if anyone lingered at the end of the lane. She knows the stories, the desperate father carrying his child through the dark, the neighbor who ran from her own home when the fever took her husband. Some say the lost wander from house to house, looking for a door that might open, even when every door is nailed shut. So she leaves her candle burning, a flicker that says, if you must knock, knock here. If you're cold, if you're alone, if your heart is splitting at the seams and your feet carry you nowhere but forward, her light is waiting. Sometimes they do come. A scrape at the door, a soft voice on the other side. She opens it just wide enough for a cup of broth, a crust of bread, a scrap of cloth to press to a fevered brow. She does not invite them in. The walls must hold what little safety they can, but she does not turn them away either. The candle is her sign, a promise stitched from old kindness and stubborn hope. Meanwhile, the neighbors whisper about her. They say she's mad to leave a flame so close to the drafty shutter. They say the plague will see that light and slip under the door like a snake drawn to warmth. But she keeps it anyway, even when wax grows scarce, when the scraps of tallow come from boiled bones she might have used for broth instead. Sometimes she talks to it, the flame. She leans close and murmurs words too soft for the girl to hear. The names of those she's fed through the crack in her door. The name of her husband, lost last winter when the snow buried the lane so deep they never found the grave come spring. She tells the flame things she cannot tell her sleeping child. That some nights, when the wind howls, she almost wishes the door would open wide and let it all in. But then the child stirs in her sleep, a soft sigh against the hearthstones, and the mother knows she'll tend this light until her fingers can no longer lift the match. So look at it now, that single candle. It gutters once, dances high, bows low, but it holds. A tiny defiance against the dark that presses in on all sides, a promise that someone still waits at the window, watching, hoping, not for miracles. No one dreams of those now, but for a softer dawn than the night deserves. Sleep here a while, if you can. Rest your thoughts by that flicker of gold behind old glass. The village might be lost in its hush, the lanes empty, the grave shallow, but this house keeps its flame. And tonight, that's enough. Stay close, because next, we'll step into the hush of the graveyard again, where the earth sags and secrets lie half buried, and the gravedigger's dreams echo with names he can't forget, and the candle will keep burning. Picture the graveyard in the hour before dawn. The sky is neither black nor blue, but something in between, that bruised shade that belongs to things that wake when no one's looking. The stone wall that hems the churchyard and sags under its own weight, green with moss, its mortar crumbling where the frost bites deepest each winter. Inside, mounds of freshly turned earth lie like sleeping beasts. Some are marked, rough planks nailed together, splashed with a name, a date that means nothing now. Others are just bare humps, the only witness to their passing a single stone pressed into the mud, or nothing at all but the way the soil sinks when a frost comes. Picture him there, the grave digger, curled on a stool by the chapel sidewall. His back is bent in sleep, his breath curling in soft puffs that catch the moonlight as it slips through the gap in the thatch overhead. His spade rests against the stone, its blade dulled and nicked from too many roots, too many frozen mornings when the ground fought him for every shovelful. His coat is patched so many times you can't tell where the original cloth ends and the scraps begin. His boots are stiff with mud that never seems to dry, the soles worn thin by footsteps that circle the graveyard again and again. A map of grief traced in footprints no rain can wash away. Listen close. You can hear him dreaming. He talks in his sleep sometimes, words dragging from his throat like a shovel scraping over stone. Names slip out. Martha, Tom, Little Ann, some he knew once. Faces he can still see when the shovel bites deep enough. Some are just shapes now, wrapped in blankets that slip through his hands too quick for memory to hold. He dreams of the shallow graves, the ones he never dug deep enough because the earth was too hard, the line too long, the cart waiting by the gate with another bundle of cloth that needed to lie down before the sun rose. In the dream, he stands at the edge of the pit, boots slipping in the mud, watching the earth spill back in before he's even done. The bodies shift, eyes open, not to accuse but to remind. Here I am. Remember me. Remember me. Meanwhile, a rat scurries over the edge of a mound, tiny feet pattering across a plank marker that leans like a drunk against the head of the grave. The gravedigger stirs, mutters, his hand twitching as if reaching for his spade, even in dreams. He knows the rats come, knows they nose the fresh soil, dig when the nights grow lean. Some nights he tries to chase them, but the rats always come back. Hunger does not care for prayers or pity. In his dream, he stands at the gate, the heavy iron latch rusted under his palm. Beyond the gate, a line of villagers stretches into the mist, each with a shape wrapped in blankets at their feet. They do not speak. They only watch him, eyes hollow as old well stones. When he lifts his spade, they nod once, and another bundle is laid at his feet. He digs and digs, but the pit never grows deeper. The soil slides back in, black and wet and heavy as regret. Sometimes the priest comes in these dreams, holding out a flask of wine that tastes like ash when it touches the gravedigger's lips. "You've done enough," the priest says, but the line does not shorten. The bell ringer's shadow moves behind the graves, swinging his iron bell so slowly the sound never quite dies. Ding, ding, ding. The gravedigger shifts on his stool. His breath catches in a low snore, then a sigh. The fire in the chapel hearth. The small comfort he keeps when the night grows colder than bone. Snaps and spits a single spark that floats up to the rafters before it dies. Outside, dawn pushes at the edge of the sky. A thin crack of silver that spills over the graveyard like a promise too weak to hold. The mounds lie quiet, the stones slick with dew, the wooden markers casting shadows longer than the stories carved into them. The gravedigger dreams on, of spades and shallow earth, of names whispered through damp soil, of hands that slip from his grip before he can lay them down soft. And yet, when he wakes, he will stand. He will lift the spade again, push it into the frostbitten ground. He will measure each grave with a prayer caught in the corner of his throat. Not because he believes it will stop the rats, or the plague, or the line at the gate, but because it's what keeps his hands moving when the bell rings. So stand here a moment at the edge of this sleeping field. Feel the hush that settles over the stones, the hush that holds secrets deeper than any grave could. Listen to the gravedigger's dreams, carried on his breath like a lullaby made of dirt, and mercy and names that never really leave him. Stay close. Let the chills slip under your blanket, but not your bones. Because next, we'll drift to where a child, alone by the hearth, learns to whisper stories of what comes after. Tales spun from fear, hope, and the promise that the dead might listen when no one else does. And the spade will bite the earth again. Imagine a single-room cottage crouched at the edge of the lane, so small it might be mistaken for a tool shed if you pass by in daylight. But inside, it hums with a warmth that feels out of place in this winter of coughs and closed doors. Push the door open with your mind, gently. The hinges creak, but no one stirs to hush them. There, in the low glow of the hearth, sits a boy, 10, maybe 11, knees pulled to his chest, chin resting on the knobs of bone that press through his threadbare nightshirt. His hair sticks up in wild tufts where his mother once tried to smooth it flat, back when her hands were steadier, back when the house didn't echo so much when he spoke. He's alone tonight. The straw pallet in the corner lies empty, its blanket folded neatly like a promise he keeps making to himself. Mama will be back. She just gone to fetch rosemary from the herbalist. Just gone to see the priest. Just gone, but he knows. You can see in the way his eyes flick to the door, then back to the hearth, then to the little bundle of rags that keeps slipping from his lap. The hearth glows soft, embers shifting under a crust of ash. The boy pokes at them with a stick he found behind the woodpile. Too green to burn well, but it makes a sharp smell that reminds him of the fields before the plague turned them into graveyards with furrows of stone instead of furrows of seed. The warmth barely touches the chill in the corners, where the wind slips in through cracks choked with rags and old prayers. And here's the curious thing, he talks to the shadows. Not like a frightened child babbling to the dark to keep it at bay, but like someone telling stories to a room full of guests who refuse to speak back. Picture this. He leans closer to the glow, the stick tracing shapes in the ash. "You hear me," he murmurs, voice soft, so the wind at the shutter won't steal it away. "If you're out there, Papa says you listen better than the living do. Says the dead got time for stories, more time than anyone." He glances at the pallet again, eyes catching on the rough cross scratched into the wall above it. The one his mother traced with a shaking finger as she whispered, "Stay safe here, love. Stay safe." So he tells them a story, his voice weaving pictures in the flicker of orange on the wall. He tells them about a summer day, before the rats came bold as kings. About how he ran barefoot through the garden while his father dug potatoes. How his mother scolded him for muddy toes and kissed his hair anyway. He tells them about the rooster who crowed so loud the neighbors complained. About the pie cooling on the sill. About the way his mother laughed when he stole the last plum. "Bet you'd like that," he says to the hush. "Plums. Sweet. Sticky." His finger dips into the ash, sketching a round shape that could be a fruit, or a face, or the sun he barely remembers. "Bet you'd like the pie too." Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the shutter on its single nail. The boy stiffens, eyes wide, but then he remembers, the dead do not knock. If they come, they slip through the cracks you can't see, curl around your shoulders like cold arms you can't shrug off. He settles deeper by the hearth. His breath mists in the faint glow, curls around the shape of his words. "You listening?" he asks again, softer now. "You listening good?" He tells them another. The one his mother spun when the fever first came. A tale of a far-off village where no one died, where the well never went dry and the bread stayed fresh no matter how many mouths needed feeding. Where the graveyard was just a patch of green, where flowers grew so wild they tangled in your hair when you napped on the grass. "Is it real?" he asked the shadows. "If it's real, tell Mama. Tell her to find it. Tell her." His voice snags on the word. He swallows, wipes his nose on his sleeve. The stick snaps in his fingers, charred tip falling into the embers with a soft hiss. Meanwhile, the house creaks like an old ship on a slow tide. The wind finds the hole in the thatch, slithers down in a long sigh. The boy pulls the blanket tighter around his shoulders, curls into the space where his mother used to sit, where her warmth still lingers in the memory of his bones. He tells them one last story, a quick one, stitched together with the scraps of hope he's not ready to throw out yet. When the bell stops ringing, he whispers, eyes drifting shut, the dead stop needing stories. But not tonight, yeah? Not yet. You stay. You listen. I'll tell you more tomorrow. He drifts there, between the hush and the hearth, the ashes and the wind, the living and the dead who gather close to hear what only a child's heart still has room to believe. So rest here a moment. Feel the glow of the embers on your cheek, the chill on your back where the blanket slips. Listen for the boy's voice curling through the cracks, small, sweet, stubborn enough to keep the hush at bay for one more hour. Sleep if you can, because next we'll follow the rats as they creep from hearth to hearth. Clever shadows with bright eyes, weaving their own quiet kingdom through the ruin. And the stories will wait for you. Imagine the village at its quietest. Not the hush of prayers whispered behind shuttered windows. Not the hush of the graveyard's shallow earth. But the hush that lives under the floorboards, in the dark corners where the broom never reaches, in the crawl space between the thatch and the beams. That's where they thrive. The rats. Picture them now. The King's Court. If you could believe such a thing, a slow parade of slick fur and twitching whiskers slipping through the holes the villagers pretend not to see. Their world is a maze of timber and mud. Old crates stacked behind the baker's empty shop. The hollow walls where heat hides for just a breath longer than the winter wants to allow. If you listen closely, you'll hear them. Not the squeaks you'd expect. They're quieter than that. The scrape of tiny claws on wood. The soft shuffle of bodies brushing past each other in the dark. A faint gnawing, wood cloth, anything that stands between them and the warmth they crave. The villagers believe they bring the plague with them, riding it like a secret on their fur, a curse tucked beneath those sharp, shining teeth. But the truth is simpler, crueler. The rats do not care. They are hunger made flesh, small shadows that slip in when the bread runs out and the doors bolt shut. They survive because they do not hope. They do not pray. They do not bury the dead. They find what the grave forgets and take what the river carries downstream. Imagine slipping into their world for a moment. The way they see this village, not as a place haunted by fear and sorrow, but as a kingdom cracked open, spilling its warmth and scraps into every corner. They scurry from hearth to hearth, darting under tables where crumbs gather like gold coins. They slip through the graveyard too, tiny feet packing down the fresh mounds, noses twitching at the scent of shallow sleep. In the attic of a grand house, the nobleman's house you remember, a nest hides behind the old trunks where silks and linens rot under dust. The rats move like shadows, stitched with muscle and squeaks. A mother curls her tail around her pink, blind litter, nose flicking at the faint scent of wine and rosemary drifting up from the room below. She does not care for velvet or candles or prayers whispered over a child's fevered brow. She cares for the scraps that will be left behind when the fever burns through another warm bed. Meanwhile, in the plague house, where the mother hums her lullaby into her daughter's damp hair, another whiskered shape moves behind the wainscot. Its belly brushes the dusty beam, feet leaving little tracks through the powder of old plaster. It listens to the hush of breath, thin, rattling, and waits for the final silence that always follows. The rats are patient kings. Step into the alley behind the tavern now, where barrels lie split like broken teeth. Here, the rats gather in a parliament of tiny bodies, snouts dipped in a pool of rainwater tainted with vinegar and ash. They drink greedily. One climbs over the other, slipping into a half-buried sack that once held barley for the brewer's casks. There is no barley left, but the sack smells warm, earthy, a memory worth nestling into for the hour before dawn. And still they move, out, over, under, weaving a map the villagers can't see. A tunnel through the woodpile behind the herbalist's door. A path through the graveyard where the soil sinks under their weight. Light as a breath, but heavy enough to leave a mark. Sometimes they pause near the river, whiskers flicking at the scent of what drifts by, shapes wrapped in cloth, things the earth refused, now offered up to the current. The rats take their share. The river does not mind. Picture this. In a loft above the small boy's cottage, the one where he whispers his stories to the dead, a single rat perches on the beam, eyes glittering in the candlelight that spills through the cracks in the thatch. It listens. It watches the rise and fall of the blanket where he sleeps now, mouth half open around a promise that tomorrow he'll tell more stories, stories to keep the hush from slipping too deep. The rat does not understand the words, only the warmth, the breath, the steady drum of a heart that still beats. And so they rule, these small kings and queens of every nook and eve, the kingdom beneath the beds, the empire inside the walls. They do not pray for the plague to leave. They do not weep when the bell tolls for another name. They only wait, patient as frost, clever as shadows, hungry as ever. So stand here a moment, at the edge of the lane where their tiny feet patter through the mud. Feel the hush of fur brushing fur. Hear the soft squeak that slips through the cracks when the last lantern sputters out. They are here, always, weaving the village together in a net of tails and teeth and eyes that never blink. Stay close. Pull your blanket tighter. Sleep if you can, because next, the last of the prayers will rise like smoke in the church. A final gathering of those too tired to hope, too stubborn to stop. And the rats will listen too. Picture the church at dawn. Not the bright kind of dawn that spills gold on the pews and makes stained glass dance on stone, but the thin gray dawn that tastes like ashes on your tongue. The big wooden door, the one carved with saints whose faces have been worn down by a century of wet hands and desperate knocks, hangs ajar. Not wide, just enough. Step inside. Feel how the air holds its own hush. It smells of cold stone and candle wax, old incense that clings to the rafters like cobwebs you can't brush away. The pews, once polished by generations of weary knees, are rough with splinters now, the cushions threadbare and frayed. Here and there, a blanket lies draped over the seat, left behind by someone who sat too long and didn't make it home. At the front, the priest stands by the altar. His robe is a patchwork now, the fine embroidery long since replaced by hurried stitches where moths and damp found purchase. His voice is a ghost in this space, but he lets it rise anyway, cracked and low, echoing off the stone walls like a prayer that forgot it was ever meant to be heard. Around him, the last of the faithful gather, old men wrapped in coats too big for their shoulders, women with shawls drawn so tight they look like shadows stitched into the pews. There are no children here now. They are home, curled under thin blankets, watched by grandmothers too frail to climb the church steps, or they lie still under mounds behind the graveyard wall. Picture the priest lifting his hands, fingers trembling as he touches the edge of the chalice that once shone like treasure under the candlelight. He murmurs the words, the old Latin, the familiar blessings. But the Latin slips through the cracks in his teeth, thin and trembling, each syllable a ghost that drifts up toward the rafters and clings there with the scent of old incense. In the back row, an old woman kneels alone. Her knees creak when they touch the cold flagstones. Her breath whistles through missing teeth. She does not close her eyes. They stay wide, staring at the crucifix above the altar, the carved Christ whose face is lost in shadow. She mouths the words she remembers from her mother's lap. Miserere nobis. Miserere, have mercy on us. She doesn't know if he listens. She's not sure she wants him to. Meanwhile, a man sits slumped at the aisle's end, head bowed over rough, clasped hands. A merchant once. His boots still bear the faint polish of better days. But now the soles are split where the mud finds a way in. He hasn't spoken aloud in weeks. The words inside him feel heavy, like stones at the bottom of a river. But when the priest's voice cracks, the man's lips part, and a single word slips out, Amen. A whisper that feels too small to bind the dead in their graves, but too stubborn to swallow. Near the altar, a small brazier burns. Sprigs of rosemary and sage hiss in the coals, sending up a bitter smoke that curls around the priest's shoulders like a blessing that smells more like fear. He waves it through the air with a frayed cloth, the motion more habit than hope now, as if the plague cares for smoke when it can slip through the seams of every shutter in town. Imagine the hush that follows each line of the prayer, that breathless pause as if they're listening for an answer, a sign, a shift in the cold air that says yes. You are heard, but the silence stays. It tastes of stone and stale wax, and the faintest echo of the bell ringers mournful clang beyond the walls. Outside, the wind rattles the stained glass. A pane cracked years ago, patched with resin that leaks when the rain grows heavy, flexes under the pressure. For a moment, the dawn light filters through it, painting a pale splash of red across the priest's chest. He feels it, this warmth that isn't warmth at all, and lets the last line fall from his lips like a feather. Deliver us. The people stand, one by one. Some linger, pressing trembling fingers to the base of the altar, leaving behind smudges of candle wax and salt. Others slip back down the aisle, boots scuffing on stone that's worn smooth by centuries of kneeling. They do not speak. They do not look each other in the eye. Outside, the rats wait for crumbs near the threshold, bold enough now to scurry across the flagstones once the last footstep fades. The priest stays. He stands at the altar long after the final voice has drifted out the door. He wipes the chalice clean with the hem of his sleeve, fingers clumsy where they brush the tarnished rim. He does not blow out the candles this morning. Let them burn, he thinks. Let them eat themselves down to nothing, a final glow for anyone still left to see. So stand here a moment at the back of this quiet sanctuary. Feel how the cold seeps through your boots, how the smoke scratches at the back of your throat. Listen to the silence between the priest's heartbeats, the hush that holds every word they've poured into this stone, every name stitched into the prayers they never finished. Sleep if you can. The door is open for now, but the hush will follow you out, trailing you like incense into the lanes. Because next, when the final prayers fade, the hush will break. Not with hope, but with a riot of coughs and the hiss of whispers that say maybe, just maybe, the plague will pass by come spring. And the candles will gutter out one by one. Step back into the narrow lane behind the churchyard wall, where the wind slithers low and the thatched eaves drip with last night's frost. Dawn has come, but hasn't brought warmth. It brings only a thin, watery light that glances off shuttered windows and finds no welcome inside. This is the hour when the village pretends to wake, when footsteps scrape across muddy thresholds and children press their noses to the cracks in the shutters, hunting for a promise they can't name. But listen closer. The hush is broken now, not by laughter or the shuffle of boots heading to market, but by the cough. That first sharp bark that tears the quiet like a rag splitting in the wind. It starts in one house, a dry gasp that rattles the beams overhead. A man rolls onto his side on a straw mattress, so Thin you can count the knots through the cloth. He clamps a cloth to his mouth, but the sound slips through anyway. The children in the corner stir, pulling the blankets tighter, pretending the noise is just the wind scratching at the shutters. But the wind doesn't rattle like that. The wind doesn't wheeze and catch and drag itself out over cracked lips. So the children know. They curl closer together, pretending they don't. Next door, a woman stands at her hearth, stirring a pot of broth so thin it smells more of water than of bones. Her spoon clinks against the iron, a small sound, but it's swallowed by the cough that shudders up from her chest. She presses the back of her wrist to her lips, eyes squeezed shut as if she can force it back down where it started. The pot bubbles on, the steam curling around her hair like a ghost of something sweeter than garlic and fear. Meanwhile, outside the whispers begin, low voices that slip through cracks in doors not meant to open this morning. A neighbor leans close to another, two heads bent together over a splintered fence. Did you hear? One breathes, eyes darting toward the house with a red cross painted fresh on the door. They say he coughed all night. The priest won't come. The herbalist pots run dry. The other nods, rubs his palms on his sleeves as if the gesture can scrub the thought clean. Spring will wash it out, he lies, when the thaw comes. But spring is far, far off, and they know it. You can hear it in the way their whispers catch, in the way their eyes flick to the window, counting the days like coins in a purse already empty. Picture a child kneeling at the edge of a pallet bed. Her mother sleeps behind her, face turned to the wall, breath catching in fits that shake the whole mattress. The child folds her hands, just like the priest taught her when he still had time to visit. But the words that slip out are not prayers anymore. They're bargains. Promises traded like seeds in dry soil. I won't steal bread if you let her breathe. I'll scrub the floor every day if she doesn't cough tonight. But the cough comes anyway. A sharp bark that makes the child flinch, make her drop her hands into her lap where they lie useless, small fists that cannot push back the dark. The hush of the village hums now with these coughs, sharp and wet, dry and hollow, each one a thread in a tapestry too heavy to lift. Over it drifts the whisper, it will pass. It always does. But even the rats scurrying under the thatch seem to know the lie. They pause when the cough rips through the floorboards, noses twitching, whiskers brushing the plaster cracked by cold. In an alley behind the butcher's abandoned stall, a pair of boys crouch low, backs pressed to the wall where the sun never quite reaches. They trade a stale crust between them, fingers grubby with soot. One sniffs, rubs the back of his hand under his nose, coughs once, twice. The other flinches, scoots a half-inch away, then leans back in because warmth is warmth and scraps are scraps, no matter how the plague breathes on the air between them. Meanwhile, the graveyard behind the churchyard wall grows restless. The gravedigger wakes from his shallow sleep on the chapel bench, head thick with names he hasn't learned yet but knows are coming. He hears the cough on the wind, carried from lane to lane, stitched through the village like the plague's lullaby, and he mutters a curse into the crook of his arm. He lifts his spade with hands that never feel clean, and he listens. The cough always tells him what comes next. In a single cottage, tucked low behind a hedge gone wild with brambles, an old man sits at his table, back to the window. He hacks into a cloth so frayed it barely catches the flecks of dark that stain it. His wife, long buried now, once scolded him for his stubbornness, his pride, his refusal to bend to any fear but God. He coughs again, a sound like old wood splintering, and laughs under his breath. She told me I'd die with dirt under my nails, he rasps. Wasn't wrong. His eyes drift to the shutter, cracked just wide enough to see the lane. There, he thinks, is the world that forgot him, that will remember him only when the grave grows hungry again. So stand here for a moment, just at the edge of this lane. Feel how the hush has broken, not with hope or song, but with a symphony of small, human sounds. The scrape of a spoon, the creak of a bed, the ragged cough that pulls a prayer out of the dark whether you want it or not. The whispers cling to your sleeves now, scraps of rumor heavy as frost. It will pass. It will pass. But the hush knows better. It always does. Sleep if you can. Draw the blanket closer. Hold it tight at your throat. Listen for the wind that will come with the thaw. It may carry something sweeter than fear, or it may carry the last of the names this village has left to give. Stay near, because next we'll watch the thaw arrive at last. A slow, muddy awakening that does not heal what winter could not bury, but makes space for the living to remember what they lost. And the coughs will fade one by one. Stand at the edge of the village once more. Feel the ground under your boots. Not hard, frozen mud anymore, but something looser, damp, greedy for warmth like a mouth opening after a long silence. The frost has begun to break its grip, dripping from the thatched eaves in slow rivulets that pool at the foot of cottage walls. Where yesterday the lane was brittle with rime, today it is soft and slick with mud, the kind that clings to your soles and does not want to let you go. Picture this. The last of the snow shivers in the shadows behind the churchyard wall, dirty, shrinking into itself, flecked with straw and ash. Beneath it, the graves swell and sink, the earth restless from what it's been forced to hold. Patches of green begin to peek through, though they do not smell sweet yet. They smell of turned soil, wet roots, the faint iron tang that lingers with a shovel bit too shallow. The gravedigger stands at the gate, coat unbuttoned now, cap pulled low to shield his eyes from the first pale sun. He leans on his spade and watches a robin hop from marker to marker, breast puffed out against the thin wind. The gravedigger does not shoo it away. He lets it peck at the ground, tiny claws scratching the names he's tried so hard to forget. He murmurs under his breath, half a prayer, half a curse. When the thaw comes, he knows some things rise he thought he buried deep enough never to see again. Meanwhile, the lanes quiver back to life. The doors do not swing wide. Not yet, but here and there a latch lifts, a shutter eases open, letting the pale light creep inside like a timid guest. A child peers out, bare feet tucked under the hem of a too-short nightshirt. She presses her nose to the splintered frame, eyes wide at the puddles forming in the ruts where carts used to roll before the wheels fell silent. She whispers to her brother that maybe, just maybe, they'll see chickens scratching at the muck again. Maybe the well will run clear. Maybe Mama's cough will loosen, drift away like the mist rising off the thawed ground. At the river's edge, the ice is cracked, split like an old scar reopening. Bits of branch float downstream, weaving between shapes caught in the reeds all winter long. Bundles of cloth snagged on roots, stories the earth was too full to keep. The current nudges them loose now, carries them beyond the bend where the children once fished for minnows, where the woods close in so tight they swallow secrets without chewing. The herbalist stands on her back step, apron stiff with old stains, eyes squinting into the pale sun. She lifts her hands, raw, stained with the ghosts of 1,000 crushed leaves, and lets the warmth seep into her bones. On the shelf behind her, fresh sprigs of green push through the soil in a cracked clay pot. Tiny defiant shoots. She smiles at them, a thin, cracked thing that doesn't quite reach her eyes. But it's something. The first promise of a cure she no longer pretends to understand. The kind that comes not from mortar and pestle, but from the earth remembering how to forgive. Elsewhere, the candle in the widow's window burns lower each night. She lets it gutter out now, sometimes and does not weep when the wick hisses into darkness. Her daughter sleeps deeper, her cheeks cooler to the touch. The mother hums by the hearth, the tune threadbare but stubborn as ever. She peeks through the shutter and sees the thaw creeping up the lane like an old dog coming home after a long, mean winter. She nods once, as if to say, "You took enough. No more." Picture the rats, too, kings of their little shadows, slipping through the puddles, bellies dragging in the mud. They poke at the thaw with careful noses. There is less now for them to feast on, fewer corners where fear hides stale crumbs and unwashed cloth. They scurry back to their tunnels under the beams, waiting for the warmth to stir the village into noise again, for the scraps that come not from the plague harvest, but from life's careless abundance. And somewhere in a loft, a boy sits up from a sleep too thin to feel restful. He blinks at the beam above his head, sees the trickle of water running down where the frost used to cling. He pulls his blanket tight and listens to the new hush, not the fearful hush of the plague's breath, but the soft hush of earth waking up. He whispers to no one, to everyone, "Tomorrow I'll tell you a different story. One with gardens and bread and pie cooling on the sill. One where the rats listen at the door but do not come inside." The bell ringer's cart stands empty in the yard. For the first time in weeks, the wheel does not creak under the weight of shapes wrapped tight in blankets that smell of fear and rosemary. The bell itself hangs from his wrist, silent, the iron clapper still. He runs a cloth over it, slow, careful, polishing away rust that will always come back. But today, the hush does not need its warning. So stand here, right at the edge where the mud seeps through your soles, where the thaw hums under the ground like a lullaby you thought you'd forgotten. Feel the weight of what the winter took, and the small, soft promise of what it could not. The coughs will linger a little longer, ghosts in the lungs of the living, but the frost no longer holds them tight. The river runs. The fields breathe again. The hush remains, but it is a different hush now. A hush that tastes of turned earth and warm bread, and the stubborn faith that something green can push through rot and shadow, given time. Sleep if you can. You've walked far enough tonight. Let the thaw hold you, gentle, damp, alive. And if you wake, remember, the hush is always here, patient as the earth, quiet as the first shoots breaking through a grave too shallow to keep them buried.